those are what we're drawing from. And I will turn it over to you, Mr. Cheney, and let's hear what you have to say, sir. If you'll tell us who you are and a little bit of your background, and then proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Eric Cheney from Coffee County, Georgia. I would like to take a moment to say thanks to the Governmental Affairs Committee, Chairman Blackman, for the opportunity to speak before this committee. A gentleman by the name of James Allen said, "Many thinking people believe America's best days are behind us." He wrote this statement in 1775. Many people still feel this same way today. However, I do not. I believe in my county, I believe in my state, and I believe in my country. And that's why I'm speaking to you today. Certain things we do in this life only grant us one opportunity to get them right. 3 examples of those things are skydiving, scuba diving, and holding an election. When skydiving, one must have a parachute that's packed correctly. When scuba diving, one must make sure that they have air in their tanks. And when conducting an election, we must have equipment that ensures safety, security, and fairness throughout this entire process. And I can tell you that the current system does not afford us these luxuries. I'm here to express today the dilemma that we as a board here in Coffee County experienced certifying the electronic recount performed in the November 3rd, 2020 general election. As you know, the certification process requires the election supervisor to swear under oath and under penalty of perjury that the certified votes are a true and accurate reflection of the count or recount. In the instant case, the election supervisor of Coffee County could not honestly make such an attestation given the inherent inconsistencies existing within the electronic summary report generated by the Dominion voting system. The basis for the dilemma is simple. The election summary report for the electronic recount tabulated votes in a manner that resulted in more collective votes being cast for the presidential candidates than the total number of votes reflected within the report or recount. The inconsistent count could not be reconciled. The election supervisor of Coffee County could not be reconciled. This fact, the inherent inconsistency existing within the is simple. The election summary report for the electronic recount tabulated votes in a manner that resulted in more collective votes being cast for the presidential candidates than total in the report. I repeat, the inconsistent count could not be reconciled. That point is very important. When you can't reconcile count, you must stop and figure out why that count cannot be reconciled. This fact, the inherent inconsistency is in fact inherent inconsistencies along with grounds not to certify the election based on the Dominion data set and report. However, the reluctance to certify the electronic recount was compounded where those results were considered in context with 2 prior vote count results. As this committee knows, a hand count of the original general election balloting occurred on November 16th and November 17th. Coffee County's hand count yielded 1 more ballot than was reflected on the ballot count on election night. At the direction of the Secretary of State of Georgia, if the hand count yields a net vote difference of less than 5 votes, the board was instructed to certify the original vote tally. Coffee County certified on the original election results on November 9, 2020. We certified those results really not being comfortable with the outcome. You see, the Secretary of State says that if we have a 5-vote differentiation that we can work from. That's 5 votes. 5 votes. What if that 1 vote or second vote or third vote was your vote, Chairman? that may have counted or may not have counted. Every single vote in the state of Georgia that is a legal vote, we don't need to regard them as just, we don't have to count them, or we can count them, we may count them, we can kind of get it right. No, this has to be done exactly right, every single time. The election report used to certify the original election results was internally consistent, meaning that the sum of the votes for each presidential candidate equaled the total votes reflected on the report. The hand count also yielded the same internal consistency within the report. If you will see Exhibit 5, it is worth noting that we believe Dominion electronic election reports generated in prior elections were likewise internally consistent as well. The internal inconsistency of the election summary report stands in stark contrast to all other prior elections. I want to read that line one more time. The internal inconsistency of the election summary report stands in stark contrast to all other prior elections. When I mentioned exhibits a moment ago, we have sent in a list of exhibits and a total package of data that we would love for you to look through. Anyone who may.
We do have that, Mr. Cheney. I do have a couple of questions, and I know we're going to run out of time. I don't want to cut any important points that you might have out, but I do have a couple of people that want to ask. A couple of committee members have a couple of questions. So,
Yeah.
Representative Bernal, you had a question? You wave. Okay. Representative Turner had a question.
I might have missed it. I heard that you said, thank you, by the way, for being here. I'm going to speak quickly in the interest of time. I heard you say that there was one extra vote in the hand count versus the machine count, but I don't know that I picked up on how far off the second machine count was.
I was getting to that point.
Okay.
And further down my explanation.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind answering the question, please.
Yeah, please continue, Mr. Cheney.
Yes, we have a 50 vote difference, 50 votes in the second hand count that we could not reconcile, could not duplicate.
Was that a hand count or a machine count the second time?
That is a machine count.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Cheney, did you have anything else?
Yes, sir. How much time do I have left?
You got about a minute.
Well, listen quick or I'll speak fast, okay?
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to cut out this list of exhibits and kind of get down to the bottom of what I have here. This committee must understand in the same election cycle, we identified other problems with the Dominion system and reported the same to the Secretary of State. On November 13th, a letter was written to the Secretary of State identifying these serious concerns. A copy of that letter and relative documents were also attached. Let me just paraphrase. I had quite a bit of stuff to go on, but I'll just paraphrase. We saw the house burning for several weeks now. We've picked up the phone, we've called the fire department. No one has responded. We have basically begged Chris Harvey and the Secretary of State to come to Douglas, Georgia, to our elections office, listen to our concerns, and if we perform any way, shape, form, or fashion that is not right, help us correct this beforehand. We have been denied that. Coffee County has been denied any help from the Secretary of State's office, and it's documented in each of our exhibits. We have plenty of supporting documents that speak to this, and we have begged the Secretary of State to come to Douglas, Georgia. It's only 2 hours from Macon, Georgia to Douglas, Georgia. Get down here and help us. That's what we've asked for, and we haven't received it. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me today. And if you have any further questions, my email is included in the supporting documents. Be glad to help you any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Makes you feel any better? We had requested them to appear today as well, and they declined. Although I do understand that they are having a 3 o'clock press conference here shortly, so perhaps that may be an opportunity for some questions to be asked. But thank you again for being with us today, Mr. Stone. I believe you're next with Bibb County.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll mute now.
Good afternoon. I am Jason Stone, member of the Bibb County GOP party, living in North Macon. I want to thank the committee for hearing me today. It's very important. My testimony is unique in the sense that I was the sole Republican allowed into the tabulation, replication, and adjudication room during the entire process of the ballot opening, scanning, and the adjudication for absentee, military, and provisional ballots. During my time at the Bibb County Board of Elections from October 27th until Election Day, and then again November 13th for the first recount, I witnessed many suspicious activities, including 2 blatant election law violations, as well as being intimidated and ejected from the Board of Elections on November 13th. By Janetta Watson, the county election supervisor, commanding a deputy sheriff to do so using law enforcement as her personal bouncer with no formal charges. I heard 2 issues discussed during the Senate hearing that were left unanswered, and I'd like to answer those first. It was discussed referring the pristine ballots seen during the recount that they might be reproduced ballots, but this is not true. A reproduced ballot is printed on a standard size piece of paper with a QR code and cannot be mistaken for an actual absentee ballot. Secondly, there is no difference between the absentee ballots issued from the Board of Elections and the ballots sent out by outside vendors. It was assumed in the Senate hearing that there were obvious differences, but there are not. My personal issues with the process start with the fact that when envelopes come into the building from either the post office or drop box, they're put into the Janetta's office, where she personally, as I was told, matches the signatures to the Bibb County voter rolls. This process is done in private with no Republican or any other observation for that matter. So when the absentee ballot envelopes arrive out into the workstations, they are assumed to be correct. You know, we have no way of knowing if those ballots were legitimate or not. Second, the vote review panel that I was a member of was invited to witness the absentee ballot opening process of the absentee ballot opening during Tuesday, October 27th. It was later that day I was told that the staff and the paid poll workers had been processing absentee ballots since Monday, October 19th. Meaning there were 7 days of unobserved absentee ballot processing without any observation. Third, in accordance with the Georgia Code Title 21 of Elections 21-2-386, Section A, Chapter 1, Subsection G, Paragraph 7, it states, and I quote, "The absentee ballots shall be tabulated in accordance with the procedures of this chapter for the tabulation of absentee ballots. As such, ballots shall be placed in locked ballot boxes and may be transferred to locked ballot bags if needed for security. The ballots were left unsecured in standard plastic post office tubs under the tables and hidden behind a rolling partition for the entire time I was there, which was about 2 weeks." Subsection G, paragraph 3 of the same document explains that the county election superintendent can only open the inner envelopes on election day unless a letter was sent to the Secretary of State's office at least 7 days in advance and published on the website. After several calls, I couldn't find evidence of that letter, and I'm assuming opening them 2 weeks in advance and keeping them unsecured is a violation of 2 election laws. There is an occasion where I was ejected from the Board of Elections by the county election superintendent, but since I'm limited time, I'd rather not do that one right now. But in closing, the entire election process has created many problems with Americans, primarily trust in the system. The major problem was the fraud of the left trying to steal the election as they made the numbers too big. Anyone that believes Joe Biden received 10 million more votes than Obama is delusional. The fate of the United States hangs in the balance with the January 5th runoff elections. Now that our election has reached the Supreme Court, it's time to defend Georgia. So I'm calling out to the governor and the Democrats of the General Assembly to call an emergency session. It takes 3/5 votes to do this. For those that don't believe in the Constitution, every single government official, including each of you, took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And we demand that you do that here. You need to defend our election process and protect the runoffs on January 5th by admitting that the level of fraud is so great that there's no way to determine real from fake. The General Assembly needs to be an example to the other states and do the right thing. Join the Texas Supreme Court case. Either take back your power, call a special session, and pass laws to prevent fraud for January 5th, or admit to the citizens of Georgia, America, and the world that you don't support fair elections. It's time to choose a side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. I do not see any questions from anyone. I appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you for your testimony, and we're going to go ahead because I believe Ms. McCarthy is with us today. And
Yes,
she's next on our list. If you want to, I think with Dekalb County, Ms. McCarthy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcy McCarthy, and I would appreciate that you had me here today. I am a successful businesswoman in the cybersecurity industry. I was elected as a 2020 national delegate for the Republican National Convention. In 2020, I served on the voter review panels, known as VRPs, representing the Dekalb GOP during the June presidential primary, August runoff elections, as well as in the general special election in this past November. Today, I'll share with you how 4 areas in the processes and controls that were either altered or removed entirely for the general special election that were in place for the June presidential election the June presidential primary and August runoffs. This caused several irregularities and inconsistencies within the VRP in Dekalb County. My first point today that I'll bring forth. The role and composition of the VRP changed from a 2-person bipartisan panel to a 4-person panel that was not objective. For 5 days, the VRP had 2 pairs operating independently of each other. My second point, when adjudicating ballots via the scan images on the computer, there were no processes in place to protect the integrity of the original ballot. There were no system or physical controls or paper or system log files of the VRP ability to even lock the vote after it was adjudicated, but still required further review. Computer IDs were shared amongst election office personnel on the workstations that were assigned to perform the ballot adjudication of the VRP. My third point that I'll bring forth to you today is the duplication of the absentee and military ballots did not have witnesses as required by our state's constitution. In the general special election, the duplication of military ballots was done by Dekalb County election office personnel in a separate location and time frame outside the oversight of a VRP. My fourth point today, because there is no checks and balances in the absentee ballots authentication processes, human error caused 2 voters in Dekalb County to be disenfranchised, and that was unbeknownst to them as their absentee ballots were from the wrong election. And the outer and inner envelopes had already been separated by the time we received that at the VRP. And there was an inherent bias in the VRP once working within a single body. So just to familiarize everybody, the VRP is to determine the voter's intent and is to be done so in a bipartisan manner. During the combined presidential primary and runoff elections, the VRP was comprised of a Republican and a Democrat and was truly bipartisan. However, during the general special election, the VRP was comprised of 4 people, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, and 2 nonpartisans. The nonpartisans were represented by the League of Women Voters, who officially claim to be nonpartisan in that they don't support a candidate or a party, but they share a variety of progressive public policy positions that are in direct alignment with the Democrat Party's political platform. In practice, the VRP composition during the general special election was comprised of 1 Republican and 3 Democrats. Although the Georgia Secretary of State's office authorized a start date of October 19th, 2020, the VRP panels in Dekalb County did not commence their work until October 28, 2020. From October 28, 2020 to November 1st, 2020, the 4-person VRP operated as 2 separate VRPs. The Republicans and the Democrat participating in the VRP only analyzed the general election components of the ballot. The special election for the Senate was adjudicated separately with the nonpartisan pair. There was no oversight for them. During the time frame, over 800 ballots were put into a system quarantine mode and sent to the nonpartisan VRP, again, without any oversight or control, nor any observation and participation from the Republican and Democrat VRPs. This was done to expedite the workflow of the VRPs due to the high volume of paper ballots that were received, a delayed start, and because of the fact there was only 1 pair of a nonpartisan VRP, but we had 5 to 7 pairs of bipartisan VRPs. Much of the adjudication was done on the computers as the ballots could be scanned but could not be processed due to an imperfection. This could be something like a hesitation mark, a write-in candidate, and or just an overvote. But unlike the earlier elections, the elections office worker would perform the adjudication via the computer at the direction of the bipartisan VRP on the scanned ballot image. We also had to go into a special room and had a paper logbook where we both signed in and out of the secure area. In the general special elections, the system adjudication was done with minimal supervision from the election supervisor, and changes to the ballot were done independently by 2 VRPs for 5 days. There was no system controls, no physical controls in place, and there was no audit control to protect the decisions made by either VRP as the ballots went into a system quarantine mode. There was no way to lock the scanned ballot when being viewed on a computer. So whomever was the last VRP to review a ballot in quarantine could still anonymously edit the previous VRP's work, transmit it to be completed, which would cast the ballot. Because the nonpartisans were operating independently, and the most common error in the special Senate election race was an overvote of the 5 Senate Democrat candidates, there was an untethered opportunity to award that overvote to Raphael Warnock, as there would be no audit trail that showed a modification that was made and when that change was made and who made it. There was no changes in procedure until I expressed my grave concerns to Lane Flynn, who is the DeKalb GOP chairman, on October 29th, following my VRP shift. The most common error that I observed on the absentee ballots was an overvote of the Democrat senatorial candidates. I observed and noted that the computers being used by the VRPs to review the ballots were signed into by various DeKalb election office personnel, all sharing the same user IDs. So there was no possible way to track the identity of who actually logged in into any of the computers and who sat at them. The lack of physical and system controls was just astounding to me. Other than receiving an authorization letter from either the affiliated political party and being sworn in at the time of your first shift, there were 0 records being maintained. Furthermore, the badging was ad hoc at best, where some of the VRPs had the laminated badges, but most had sticker badges. It's important fact that the military.
Ms. McCarthy, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt,
Yes.
but we're got about a minute left.
Okay, well, I have a lot to share with you, and I hope you would lend me a little bit of additional time, because I think you're going to be very interested in what I have to say next.
We most certainly are interested. Take an extra minute, but we can certainly welcome you back and take that testimony in writing as well.
So I want to bring to your attention, I appreciate the extra time and leniency. And an important fact, military ballots cannot be read by our scanners in Georgia. The Special General Election Dekalb County Elections Office accepted 1,878 military ballots out of 25 initiated. During the time frame of the general special election, there was a significant difference in the duplication process of the absentee military of the COA ballots. For the summer elections, the VRP did the duplication of the absentee and military ballots. But during the special and general election, the duplication was actually performed by unobserved election workers. And to provide clarity, to describe what a duplication of a ballot is, it was done in the summer by a Democrat and a Republican. And it was done because it could not be read by the scanner. The work was labor intensive and very time consuming, and it was overseen by the Dekalb County election supervisors, but it was completely bipartisan. During the time frame of the special general election, the VRP did not duplicate ballots at all. That was again done by election workers, which is against our Constitution in terms of there. They were also serving as a glorified VRP because they would only give us the rejected ballots that they felt that they could not transcribe directly. Okay, and this was done during our special general election without any oversight. I think that should make everybody here very concerned about the integrity of our election. This decision was made by Erica Hamilton, of the Director of DeKalb County Voter Registration and Elections Office. So I would like to also share one other point with you. We had a voter review panel that finally got together as one body 5 days into the process. We found 2 absentee ballots from the wrong election in our pile of ballots that we were to manually adjudicate. One was for Donald Trump and one was for Joe Biden, but it was from the presidential primary election. I have to ask everybody here today, if we're doing a verification and authentication of the signatures, the ballot, why were 2 ballots in the same pile presented itself there and were from another election? So unbeknownst to 2 DeKalb voters, they did not know that they were disenfranchised, but were. There was absolutely no process in place to handle that because the ballots and the envelopes were already separated. My final point to bring forth to all of you is the bias that was inherent in the voter review panels. There was one instance where there was a paper ballot that was wet and had dried and the ink had run everywhere. I was the only Republican serving on this voter review panel, and they all lobbied around a vote that did not exist for Raphael Warnock. When I really seriously disagreed with that decision, we escalated it to an election supervisor who served as a chief voter review panel, which was not in place in our voter review panels as stated by our Constitution in DeKalb County. Essentially, she overruled me. So it was a 4-to-1 situation. Yes?
Ms. McCarthy, I apologize for having to cut you off, but we're already back up over to our original time, and we would welcome you back to testify some more very enlightening testimony you provided today. I don't see any questions, but I do want to thank you for being here. We have Miss Ashley. Is it Giles or Gillis?
It's Gillis. It's Gillis.
Gillis
Hi, my name is
from
Dr. Gillis.
Spalding County
I'm
is set at 2:30. I'm gonna let you go ahead, Miss Gillis.
Hi, I'm Ashley Gillis. I'm actually from Lamar County.
Oh,
And
they had it
I
wrong. I'm sorry.
GOP chair, and I teach therapeutic riding for children with autism and disabilities, and I appreciate you giving me the time to speak. I'm going to go right into it, but first I'd like to back up to Lamar County during the primary. During the primary, a Lamar County Elections Board member reported a technician from Dominion apparently ran about 150 absentee ballots through a tabulation scanner twice after our local tech went home sick. That technician was fired. Friday, this was during the primary, a Dominion executive came in to help start over. He determined that the fired tech had also not cleaned the scanner as he should have after every 500 ballots, which led to overvotes and other problems. We noticed it when some of the popular judges got more votes than we had ballots, and we should have caught this earlier, said an elections board member. This was reported by multiple witnesses to this, as well as our election superintendent in Lamar. So some of these issues were reported to the Secretary of State's office during the primary, and they let Dominion have 100% control over fixing these issues. Now I'm going to fast forward to the election. On November 5th, I was sent to Spalding County as a fully credentialed by the Georgia Republican Party to be an observer of canvassing ballots. It was approximately 6:30 p.m. We were locked out. A lawyer was sent up there to see if we could gain access, and we were denied access. I called the Secretary of State. There was no answer. I had to make a report with the Spalding County Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office said that they had no jurisdiction, but they would let me complete an incident report. This is still an ongoing investigation with the Secretary of State. Upon further research, I discovered that I would have to get a writ of mandamus to be allowed entrance to canvassing of ballots. At that time, the court was closed and much time was wasted. There needs to be an easier remedy to gain access and to be able to carry out our rights as monitors when there's canvassing of ballots or when ballots are being handled during this process. I have it on video. We were definitely locked out. We could not get in. And also in that incident report, you will also see that there was sensitive voter information found in a dumpster nearby. Now I'm going to go to the hand recount audit. During the hand recount audit, I was credentialed as a vote review panelist. So on Friday, October 13th, I was credentialed as a vote review panelist for Spalding County during the hand recount audit. I was instructed by the superintendent to fill out the Arlo form wrong. I'm not the type of person that's going to sign my name to anything. So I stepped out into the main lobby to pull up the instructions on my cell phone to show the others. While I was out there, I noticed some men with book bags wearing a VOB insignia on their shirts. It didn't stand out very well, but you could see it was on different places on their shirts. And the emblem was also on their book bags. I asked them where they were from, and they said they were from the Secretary of State's office. I asked a few more questions just about stuff that would be on the voter review panel, and their answers were congruent with something that would be the Secretary of State's protocol. I went back to the room on the vote review panel and discussed it with my peers, and we all agreed to fill out the Arlo form as directed per the instructions, not per the superintendent. The men came in and took out SD cards or something that was 1 inch by 1 inch. It was black, about 1/4 inch thick with gold prongs on the side of it. And they stayed about 15 minutes and then they left. During this audit process, no presidential totals were coming back on the batch forms. The batch forms were incomplete, and the supervisor remarked that no totals were to be given out until the Secretary of State released them. A witness in the other room told me that they were not even able to observe the numbers being written down as they were instructed by the staff to keep them covered. I reported this to the Secretary of State on my way home, as well as the GOP. I was asked by an investigator to make a statement, which was not needed because I was told that the Secretary of State send them out there for a forensic audit. The next day was Saturday. Still no presidential totals were coming back. And a man wearing the same insignia on the shirt came in and was introduced to me as an Arlo auditor. He worked for Arlo. I thought Arlo was a software, and I didn't realize Arlo had employees. So now things are coming back with multiple batch numbers on them more than once. So we'd have like 2 coming back that said batch 1. We started using the timestamp of when they came back on our form to keep them separate because you would not know what batch it came from. Everything was entered by the Arlo employee into Arlo and was viewed from a distance of over 20 feet away so you could not see the screen. Sunday, the Arlo employees returned as well. Still no presidential total on the batch sheets, and most were labeled batch 1. Ballots were now coming back on plain copy paper and not the card stock. On Tuesday, November 17th, I went to pick up the totals or retrieve the totals for the hand recount audit and was told by the supervisors that they were using the election result numbers per the email from the Secretary of State. So she handed me election results dated November 9th at 8:46 a.m. Again, that day was November 17th and it was after 10 o'clock. This whole process did not seem to coincide with the instructions that were given by the Secretary of State's office. I spoke with the Muskogee County Board of Elections supervisor. Her name is Nancy, and she confirmed that what I witnessed was not congruent to the protocol. And for the hand audit, the county employees were supposed to be entering information into the Arlo software program. This was also confirmed by Pike County and Lamar County Board of Elections officials. Spalding County came out with the exact same numbers during the hand recount audit as they did for the election. There was multiple vote review panels, and even on the Secretary of State's website, it says that, there was going to be human error in this, and their numbers came out perfect. What concerns me also is that ProVNV has vested interest in Dominion products. Does helping with this audit violate ProVNV's contract with the FEC now that they're helping input numbers into a CISA/Voting Works software? As of today, I have asked the Georgia GOP, I've asked the Secretary of State these questions, and I have not gotten a response to any of this and why there was somebody in Spalding County entering the numbers instead of the Spalding County employees.
Well, thank you. I'm going to take that pause as you have finished your testimony.
That's correct.
Yes, ma'am. Well,
That's correct.
have you signed affidavits for all of this, or?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, we'll make sure that we try to follow up with the appropriate authorities, as we've stated consistently through this process. And I don't see any questions. So without any questions, I believe, is it Ms. Voiles? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Hey, good to have you again.
Good to be here.
Turn it over to you.
Thank you. I want to start by saying that I really believe that free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our constitutional republic. And we have simple protections like voter ID, updated voter registration lists, which is a big one for me, that make perfect sense if we truly believe that every legal vote must count. And I think our right to vote has been preserved by the lives and blood and sacrifice of our patriots from the American Revolution up through the civil rights marches and throughout our history. And it's for that reason that I'm here today, because I think we need to make sure those sacrifices were not in vain. For those reasons, I've been a poll manager for over 20 years. Elections must be held in a manner to ensure the highest confidence of those who are entitled to legally cast a vote. And this is something I believe we need to get our hands on immediately for the upcoming January election. In those years, those 20 years, I have never seen such a lack of organization and preparation. I'm a dual poll manager in Fulton County. There was a total lack of chain of custody. Serial numbers were missing. Poll pads were tagged correctly for my poll, but they were programmed for Adams Park Library, which is over 25 miles away. This is where we discovered the polls and the machines were connected to the internet. They were programmed just as easily and remotely as perhaps my Apple computer would be programmed from somebody someplace else if I have an issue. And then where I want to spend the majority of my time, however, is on Friday, November 13th, my area supervisor for Fulton County elections sent an email requesting managers and assistant managers to help perform an audit at the Georgia World Congress Center. We had to commit to Saturday through Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. because of the multitude of work that had to be done. I reported early Saturday morning and watched a short training video on the procedures and processes. After a logistical delay, we were finally seated. They didn't have enough tables for everybody. I was table number 136, and there were 2 auditors at each table, and we were tasked with simply counting the votes that we were to be given from different polling locations and absentee ballots. Our first box was already ready for us. It was a corrugated cardboard box, and here again, the chain of custody was non-existent. It was taped with clear packing tape. It did have the secretary's seal kind of affixed to the top, not totally, but there were no signatures on it. And it was, it didn't tell us who handled the box last. In our box, after it was opened and we broke the seal, we had 800 absentee style ballots in this box. These are the same type ballots that are used for provisional. That's why I'm saying style. It was to concentrate, and this is where I want to concentrate the balance of my time, on a batch of pristine, stark, white ballots squeezed about 2/3 of the way into the box. Every other batch had 100 of these AB style ballots, and up to this point, they showed normal use, normal wear and tear. I shouldn't use the word tear, but normal little curling of the page. This particular batch had 110 ballots and was marked as State Farm Arena. That told us that's where that originated. These ballots were noticeably different in appearance, in feel. They had never been folded in any way in order to put them into an envelope as either an absentee ballot or a provisional ballot would have been done. The same provisional ballots that we received, though, on election day are totally blank. These were scored so the voter could easily know how to fold the ballot, but none of them had been folded. You could run your hand over and, barely see where it should be folded, but it had never been folded at all. Ballots that come out of the envelope, once they come to your house, you pull them out and you can tell they've got like an accordion. There are 3 places where they fold. There was an alarming peculiarity beside the appearance of the unique way that, and that was that they were copied. I'm not speaking of how ballots are sometimes duplicated if they will not go through a scanner or have perhaps come from overseas, which would not have affected these anyway. These came from State Farm Arena. So they were not overseas, they were not military ballots. Out of these, there were 106 obvious copies of the first ballot. On the first ballot for Joseph R. Biden, there was a slight little eclipse where it had not been bubbled in all the way. Every other candidate on there had similar traits to them, not as stark as that little white eclipse that was in there. These ballots, excuse me, were exact duplicates of the original one. All 106 of these ballots were for Joseph R. Biden, 2 were for Donald Trump, and 1 was for Joe Jorgensen. The 106 were identical. I can't stress that enough, including flaws and other peculiar marks on the paper. There was another issue about one of them. All of us have been in a hurry and lifted the lid to the copy machine a little too fast, and we've seen the copy that is produced slightly askew, even though the paper is right. The photographic image just isn't quite right. On that one paper, we had one of these 106 where it was a tad bit askew. So out of these 110 ballots, it was just really stunning that so many were for Biden, and even more egregious was so many copied from one original. When we left about 4:30, we were told that there were still many ballots to get through, but we would be done sometime later on Monday. The next morning, we were back at the appointed time on Sunday. Far fewer people were in the Georgia World Congress Center. Most of the other people had been Fulton County employees, and they were not there on this particular Sunday. So even though we arrived first, before the appointed time, before 7 o'clock in the morning, and other people arrived after us, we did not receive our ballot box until others received theirs. Now, the box we received on Sunday morning was of the typical kind that we have in our ballot box polls in Fulton County. They're a fabric style, roughly a cube with zippers, a pull handle and wheels that is sealed before we take them in to the service center. So the next morning, as we're waiting for ours, the gals behind us got over 3,000 ballots. The gals in front of us got over 6,000 ballots. We finally got our box. I peered inside expecting to see an enormous amount. We had 60. They were from the Quality Living Center in South Atlanta. Now, as I mentioned, this box was the type that we have seen before in the State Farm, but it was not the hard type that we saw with ballots in it being pulled from under the table. Those are typically our supply boxes. Our box was the type that was standard issue used in precincts. So when I opened this box of 60 ballots, they were of the BMD, the ballot marking device, the Dominion machines from the Quality Living Center. And they had 58 for Biden and 2 for Trump. I have long been concerned, even from personal experience, about the number of people in facilities for recovery, rehab, group homes for seniors. And far too often, ballots are requested for these people without their knowledge or without the help of any family member. These seemed a tad bit suspicious to us. We have a duty to ensure that all our eligible Americans are able to vote their own ballot, and that votes are not stolen or diluted by fraud or even administrative errors. You have any questions?
I do see Representative Turner. Did you have a question?
I do. Hi, Susie.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. I hope you are too.
Thank you for being here. We've known each other for a long time, so I'm glad to see you here today. My question is, when you saw and your suspicions became aroused, how did you react? Were you reporting that to anybody?
Are you talking about
when you saw the pristine ballots that appeared to be photocopied? Did you report that, or how did you handle that?
Well, initially I said that I had a very odd sense of ballots, but there really was no avenue at the Georgia World Congress Center, anybody in Fulton County to actually take those. We would hold up our little card that said we have a question, but they did not seem to be as alarmed over some of the things that we were alarmed with. So I allowed my concerns to be taken care of through an affidavit.
So the next step would be at any point in time, have you been in contact with anybody at Secretary of State's office or any other law enforcement type of folks to let them know what you saw?
Yes and yes. I did let the Secretary of State's office know, and I have not heard back from them. I even called them the morning of the election. I was so concerned about the lack of chain of custody. To have no seals on machines, to have no machines locked. Anybody could have tampered with those machines at any time. And then when we discovered they could be used and things could be changed via the internet, that was even more disturbing, that things were not that secure.
So nobody from the Secretary of State's office responded to your complaint?
No.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I elaborate one more time on that, Scott?
Chairman?
Yes, Mrs. Boyles, we do have one other question, and I know we're a little long, but please, I think this is important. Representative Taylor, you can just ask your question after Ms. Boyles finishes.
It's short. I just want to say I'm very well aware that both the Secretary and Gabe Sterling are aware of my affidavit, and neither of them have contacted me, and I know them personally, to say, hey, we want to hear about your concerns.
Representative Taylor? Did you still have a question? I'm not hearing anything. Ms. Wills, thank you again so much for being here. Appreciate your testimony, and we wish you well. I'm going to move to trying to give Representative Taylor a minute, but Mr. Mark Amick, say that right at all? Or
Thank you.
Got several poll watchers. Thank you again, Ms. Wolf.
Sure, it's Amick.
Amick, excuse me, Mr. Amick, I'm gonna let you go.
All right. First, I'll say thank everyone for the opportunity to share my experiences and recommendations with you today to help ensure that we have integrity with our elections here in Georgia. It also appears that my video is not working as fate would have it, so I do apologize for that. But we'll continue to move forward here. So my role in this past election and the recount and the runoff has been as a statewide poll watcher. That is different than a precinct poll watcher in that I'm enabled to go to any polling location, and that's relevant in this particular instance because I'm going to share some experiences in my testimony, citing some different examples that I have seen throughout the election process here. So quickly, one example is that on election day, I was not allowed to enter into Birmingham Falls Elementary, the polling location there in Fulton, Georgia. I was wearing my state issued badge and letter from the Secretary of State. I presented that to the poll manager, and I was not allowed to enter the voting location to watch the process. The poll manager and I went around on it for maybe 3 times where I pointed out the specific language. She did not believe that I was authorized or did not allow me the opportunity to enter, so I was not allowed to do that. Instead of escalating it, I decided to move on and not make a bigger thing out of it at that time. The next instances that occurred that morning were both in Roswell, where I was informed that there were Democrat poll watchers who were engaging with voters outside of the polling locations, that being at Mimosa Elementary and Esther Jackson. And when I arrived, and both of those were validated. So when I arrived at Mimosa Elementary, the poll watchers were engaging with voters, both leaving the location and entering between the parking lot and the school themselves, or the school itself. At Esther Jackson, I was able to verify that the poll watchers there were actually outside the location collecting voter data and voter information upon entering the location. There was one outside the door and then one who was working the line, so to speak. And the poll manager at the time was distracted a little bit because there was equipment that was not working, and she was working to solve that issue. She was not aware of that. And once she reeled that in. But there were people who were Democrat poll watchers who were gathering information, according to the manager and another supervisor who were on site. Moving ahead to November 6th at State Farm Arena, on that particular day, they were processing the provisional as well as military and UACAVA ballots. A couple things of note there. Of course, the first is with regards to the observation and the ability to observe the process. This was consistent through all absentee ballots. The room was a kind of a dog-legged shape, and you were pinned to the back corner or back part of the short end of that dog leg, and it did not allow you the opportunity to really meaningfully watch that process. You were easily a good 15 feet away from the nearest table. There was voting equipment that was in the way. There were concrete poles that were structural that were in the way, and the room dog-legged around, so you couldn't see the tables, you couldn't see other equipment, and there was a door that we are told of that is supposedly where they were bringing in the ballots, but we were not able to see that as well. I will note for the record that on the 4th, November 4th that is, and on the 6th, while I was there on each of those days, that I not at any time saw the workers pull bins or suitcases or anything out from underneath the tables as normal operating procedure. Moving ahead into something that Marcy McCarthy touched base on earlier, and that is a concern over the processing of the military and UACAVA ballots. I had flagged this as being as a concern, and I'll get into that in a minute here. The day after, according to the one thing I'm going to clarify for everybody and for everyone here is that the process, according to Rick Barron, who's with Fulton County there, as explained to myself and a few others, what they do is they will mail a form, they will email a form to military members or other overseas citizens. They will then print that form, mark that form with their intended choices, and then mail that back to the county. The county then processes it much like they would with an absentee. However, it goes through that process that Marcy mentioned with regards to duplication. I too had flagged that as a real problem because where we're at, we cannot see that process. So a worker, a Fulton County worker, takes that form and then is supposed to duplicate that form onto a ballot with the intended choices of that voter. That is not something that we are able to observe or watch firsthand. You can see it from a distance, but you cannot see whether it's authentic or validated or any parent accountability with regards to the voter's intent of casting that ballot. Same thing, the second point with regards to concern in that process is once that duplication is done, then that goes through to another individual who actually casts the ballot. There too, you are not allowed to observe or watch that process. They're behind the typical voting machine. You are not allowed to see how they vote. At any of those points, it would be seemingly and unfortunately easy to make a change without any accountability or verification or authentication in that process. And that is something that needs to change. Moving ahead to Dekalb County on November 15th, this was the date of the first recount or audit, as it was. The observation was limited at that time to one observer per 10 tables. However, they were set up in sections of 16 tables. So clearly that doesn't make sense and led to a number of conflicts and confusion. So while I do believe we need more hands-on observation, setting it up like that just only led to other problems that were unnecessary. The biggest thing that came out of Dekalb, from my experience, was an attempt to inflate the vote count for Joe Biden by 9,626 votes. Having grown frustrated with sitting and trying to watch the recount process, I decided to move somewhere where I thought or hoped that I could add a little bit more value in my role, and went to the table and the location where the workers were entering in the sheets with the recount tallies into the Arlo system. Of course, we had to stay 6 or more feet back behind them. You're not able to see what is input into the computer screen. However, at this particular batch of papers, I was able to read the batch number, essentially a box number, the table color and table number, and the vote totals for Joe Biden and President Trump. I started making notes of it because I thought it might be helpful in case there was an opportunity or a need for an audit to confirm if what was actually submitted was entered into the system. It was during this process that I started to see a pattern and kind of an expectation with regards to the final tally, which I would gauge or ballpark to be around 1,500 total in a ballot box. What came through that caught my attention that we flagged was one that was 10,707 for Joe Biden. I've turned this in as an affidavit, so I won't go into all the details, but I flagged that, worked with the Dekalb County election officials to make sure that I was a part to oversee the recount, which was conducted. And that vote total for Joe Biden ended up being 1,081 and not 10,707. That was not a simple decimal. That was not misreading of a number. Somebody wrote that down. Actually, I take that back. 2 people wrote that down and signed off on it as being counted and authentic. I don't know, that has been turned in supposedly for investigation. I too have not been contacted with regards to my input if someone wanted to gain some insight. But sir, obviously we have some concerns about that. We have concerns about what other ballot boxes would these people have counted? Are they going to be allowed to count and continue in the recount, or excuse me, not the recount, but the runoff election? So some real problems there with regards to Dekalb County and that attempted inflation of 9,626 votes. Going into just a few recommendations here real quickly, one thing that would help there, as well as other locations, is we have to have meaningful observation. We really do. And if that means that we get state issued N95 masks to be able to get up close, to be able to watch what is going on, we need to be able to do that. Clearly, this had a role in some different processes where it breaks down, and people, I think, took advantage of that. We need to look at posting and making available on large screens for transparency the vote totals that are coming in. So both at State Farm Arena and in Dekalb in this instance, in State Farm, we did not know what ballots were being counted, what was coming in, what the final results were, or anything of that nature. There should be TV monitors that say, here's what's coming in, here's the count, and here's the results. Same thing in Dekalb County. It needs to be really big. Have someone verify with watchers that are able to determine what's on the sheets of paper to be turned in, and then have it up on the big screen. So that way everyone can see, here's the batch, here's the total for each candidate, and here's the results. So that needs to be open and transparent. Bipartisan participation, as Marcy mentioned earlier, and particularly with the process for military and UOCAVA ballots, would be essential to transparency and authenticity. And we have bipartisan participation throughout different parts of the process. There's no reason why we can't have that here. I would say that we need to provide notice to the county chairs of respective parties, whatever it may be, those who are of interest, so that they have at least 48 hours of notice of when a count or opportunity to watch a process is going to take place. Too often, what I've found through this over the past few weeks was that the notice was limited and people were scrambling for staffing. There needs to be a minimum threshold, and I'm suggesting at least 48 hours, but that can be determined at another point. Just a couple last bullets. One is I'd like to suggest that there's also fraud awareness training. There's nothing on the Secretary of State's website with regards to that. I think that needs to be part of the curriculum, as well as part of the oath, which is signed by the poll manager and clerks in the locations that they understand that voter fraud is a federal crime, punishable by X years in jail and X fine per offense. I think that can go a long way for deterring people and creating awareness.
Mr. Meek, I'm going to have to, we're going about 15 minutes, so we're several over. And not that you don't have very good suggestions. We appreciate that you offering them up, but perhaps we can get a list of those in writing.
Yes, absolutely. I'll get that to you. Can I make one last point for 15 seconds?
Please.
Yes. So I have friends, which was not part of my role here, but I have friends just in my neighborhood that had votes taken from them because they handed the ballots, their kids, young 20-somethings and in college that voted, and they handed the ballot to a worker thinking they were doing the right thing, and their votes or ballots did not get cast. We need to have signs on that equipment that says, do not hand your vote to a worker or cast your own ballot, something to that effect, so we don't lose those people and their right to vote. Thank you very much, the committee. I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nguyen, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a question, but this was actually for Ms. Boyles, if that's okay.
Yeah, if we could, quick question.
Here.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you for testifying, Ms. Boyles. I just had a question about the quality living home that you mentioned. What was your specific concern around that?
My specific concern was these were ballot marking devices for years. We have been asking up in North, for years, I mean like 25 years, we have been asking in North Fulton County for at least a voting unit of the various kinds we've had since then to come to our independent living facilities and have never gotten them. My specific concern with those quality living center ballots is it's a recovery center, and they were 2 in order. Out of the 60 ballots, the first 58 were for Joseph R. Biden, and the last 2 were for Donald J. Trump. That's, as a poll manager, that's very unusual, especially to see that many for one candidate in order, and then subsequent for another in order.
Ms. Boyles, have you personally visited that home? I did just look it up, and it appears that it looks like a senior living home on Campbellton Road, which we know if you look at the statistics for voter turnout in those specific areas, they are overwhelmingly Biden votes. And there are 359 folks that are registered there. So I'm not sure if it was just a feeling that you had, or did you have any kind of evidence to back up?
No, I have not visited it. I can assure you that I will be soon, but I do have personal evidence where family members of our own have had absentee ballots ordered for them when they have been in a rehab facility, either for a stroke or for a knee repair, and it was voted for them by that person in the facility. I know someone else just this past election whose mother had one voted for her. It's just a very large concern for me that it's an area we're not watching, to have people's votes mitigated by somebody else voting for them. That's
I
Thank
do
you.
understand that we have
Ms.
laws that enable voters to.
Representative Nguyen, I'm going to move on to Ms. Susie. I'm going to move on to Ms. Susie right now.
Have a family member assist you.
Thank you. Miss Susie, I think you were next.
It's actually
At 3 o'clock.
Susie.
We're 10 minutes behind. I will try to allow some additional time to talk, or Mr. Susie. I'm sorry. I apologize if that's.
I wouldn't even look at Mrs. So.
Please go ahead and begin, and I'll try to redirect later if we have some time.
Absolutely. So just really quickly, I wanted to get started off by saying thank you for having me here today. I did speak before the state legislature last week, and it was brought into question the fact that we were not under oath. And I know that someone pretty vocally voiced that we may not have been telling the truth in our testimony. But I just want to point out for everybody really quickly that I do have a sworn affidavit in front of me, and I've sworn under penalty of perjury that the statements that I'm giving today are true, and I will continue to testify this, and I'm willing to go under oath if that needed to be done. So I just wanted to point that out really quickly. I served as a recount monitor in Cobb County and in Fulton County. I started off in Cobb, and while there's a lot of issues with Cobb County, just for the sake of time, I'll be mostly focusing on Fulton County. But I did just want to share one or two quick things in Cobb County that kind of speaks to the hostility and the tone that was given towards the recount monitors, such as myself. I was at table 18. This was on the 14th, I believe. It was the first day that I went, the first day of the recount. And I was observing one table. I was there for about 5 minutes. And within the span of 3 minutes, everybody here should be aware of the procedure that the first auditor will call out what the ballot is selected for. Then the second one will confirm it and place it in the respective bin. Well, 3 times in 3 minutes from 2:09 to 2:12, the first auditor called out and wrongly attributed 3 votes that were supposed to go for President Trump and called them out for Joe Biden. So that happened 3 times in 3 minutes. Now, the second person, the system worked. The second person caught them. But my concern is, does this always happen? Is it always corrected? Because this is just while I'm standing there. The only reason I left that table is because at another table, I was told that one of the auditors was not double checking her counterpart. She was just simply taking them, placing them into the bin. This was table 17. Very quickly, I just want to get through this. I walked over there, observed that she was not. I was told that I'm supposed to mention this to the members of the GOP who were present, and they would pass it along to the election officials. I did so. They spoke to her. I could see them talk to her, and she looking over at me. Well, when I came back around the room again, I noticed that she was still not checking, second checking the vote. As she noticed me coming up behind her, she started to exaggeratedly raise the ballots to her face, but I was satisfied with this. I'm content. All I want is for her to be double checking the ballots. But I noticed as I walked away that she was staring at me as she was being handed more ballots. And so her and other people began to get increasingly aware of me, staring me down, pointing me out, calling their bosses over, stuff of that nature. And so that's, for some reason, I haven't done anything. I haven't touched anybody. All I'm there to do is to write down, observe, and I'm not even supposed to speak to these people. So I've not even spoken to them. As I came back around the room, I got up behind the same individual and heard her say to the other monitor, the other auditor, and this is a quote, she said, "I'm paid by the taxpayer and this effing a-hole wants to come in here and watch me." Now, obviously she didn't censor herself, but for the sake of being in this meeting, I'll censor that. And my issue with that is the tone, I guess, that she had, and the just overall sentiment towards us. I'm a taxpayer. I'm lawfully allowed to be here. I've gone through the process. I have the letter that allows me to be on the floor, and to see, that the tone that they had towards us. The other things that we noticed at Cobb County, and we had this confirmed at Gwinnett County. This was when I say we, I'm referring to me and my brother who also attended. In Gwinnett County, there was not supposed to be any blue or black pins on the table. And in Cobb County, I think it's tables 27, 28, 29, 31, and 36 all had blue or black pins on their tables while they were handling absentee ballots. So the concern for this is this produces the ability to make an overvote, which very quickly, I just want to say that they were having overvotes, which were already supposed to have been sorted out of Hall C and taken to Hall B for adjudication. This is per Janine Eveler, who is the lady in charge there. Those overvotes were already sorted out, yet they continued to have overvotes turning up in Hall C. So this really begs into question, the potentiality of having the pins on the table with those and us only being allowed 4 monitors, that you could change it. But I know that we're short on time, so I just wanted to go on to Fulton County very quickly. I still have this piece of paper right here. And what this piece of paper is it is the letter that allows me to come out onto the floor at the recount. This is allowing me to get up close and personal to observe the counting tables. I still have this letter that's supposed to be surrendered because no one asked who I was. No one confirmed who I was when I got there. There was no security. I simply walked into the basement of the World Congress Center. There was a notepad where I could sign my name if I wanted to or didn't. And there was no one to confirm. And this really disturbing lack of security is very important because within just a minute of me being on the recount floor, and again, this is all sworn to in my affidavit, and I will swear to it again, a man walked up to me. They have runners who are supposed to take the suitcases to the auditing tables for them to count the ballots. They check them out at the front of the room. They bring them out to him. So this man comes up to me with the suitcase ballots and he said, hey, I was supposed to take these to table 96, but they already have a suitcase of ballots there. He then rolled the suitcase forward and asked me if I could take it. So he's offering me a suitcase of ballots. And with the security in the room, I just want to let everybody make sure it's perfectly clear. Very easily could I or someone like myself who was in that position could have walked out of that room with those ballots. And this is a large number of ballots in that suitcase. So the other question this begs is, why did table 96 already have a suitcase full of ballots when they're supposed to be checked out one at a time? And again, no one here ever confirmed who I was. I had constantly auditors asking me questions as if I was a recount official, asking me what to do with the ballots, how they could get more ballots, asking me questions about ballots. Now, I'm following my side of the rules that I'm not supposed to speak to them, so I would simply put my hands up. But I've at no point was it ever confirmed who I was being out on this floor, being as close as possible to these ballots. And you mentioned Susie Voiles was talking about these pristine ballots. I would like to say I was there while she was receiving one such batch of those ballots, the perfectly flat ballots. And I do have images of those ballots. I have pictures of those ballots that I would be more than happy to share with anybody here who would like to see those. Other things that I was able to document is that there was no, at the front of the room were all these ballot storage, ballot transport cases, I believe is what they refer to them as, were stored. There was a back hall that there was no security. Auditors could simply walk into the restroom. There was exit doors. No one was checking on the comings and goings of anybody. And I know I've repeated this several times, but no one confirmed who I was when I was there. One of the only brief incidences of communication that I had was when they asked me to step away from Susie Voiles' table because we were observing. I don't know what the issue was there, but they're at another point, they have actual batch numbers on the piece of paper where it is written down what batch they're working on. So us as monitors, we started recording those batch numbers. Well, the auditors started flipping over their pieces of paper so that we could not see the specific batch number. And when I asked one of the election officials, I said, hey, we're not supposed to talk to these people. How am I supposed to see this batch number? Is there a way I can communicate them to show them to me? His reply was, well, you're not supposed to be close enough to see the batch number. So this is all being branded as an audit when I can tell you that's not at all the case, when we're not allowed to observe certain things, not see it. But fair enough, what I was able to observe was pretty disturbing. There are several tables that I have images of these and I'd be happy to share them with you. One extremely egregious example was, it was an 8 to 10 inch tall stack of ballots that went only for Biden. And there is not a single Trump vote. So this is several thousand ballots that are represented here. These are not sorted in any way, but as the people are going through, they're placing them on the pile for Biden, and there is not a single Trump vote out of it. And I work with consumer data in my job, and I can just tell you that the odds of 100 percentile like that is, we're wary if anything approaches the 90th percentile. So for you to tell me that a certain area has voted 100% with not a single vote for President Trump, I just find that very hard to believe. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I've tried to reach out to people about this, and it's just now some people have started to answer or listen, but I only showed up as a representative, as a volunteer to go to this process to see it for myself. And I'm not some super sleuth. I'm not some detective, but I was able to just walk out there and immediately stumble into a bunch of very glaringly apparent issues. And again, I'll mention at the state legislature where they were saying that, well, we just don't know what we're looking at. We don't understand how this process is supposed to work. One, I find that a little bit condescending, this whole technocratic, autocratic idea that we are just, the plebeian fools who don't know what's better for us. But I may not work in elections, but I'm Also, I'm not a mechanic, but if your car is billowing smoke going down the highway, I can tell you have an issue. So the people claiming that everything was done above board here, I'm not even going to go as far to say that it was malice. I may have my personal opinions on that, but just the gross negligence, the disdain for the ballots, and how this was all carried out in this recount it's really been absurd, and it's been a shame.
Well, thank you, Mr. Susie. I appreciate you being with us today. And you said you have signed affidavits that.
Absolutely, and I've got these images that I can actually show them right now, but I don't know how you guys would feel about that. But I actually have the pictures of Susie Voiles ballots that you can see. They are flat ballots.
Please forward that on to us so that we
Absolutely
can make it available. And thank you again very much for coming. We will probably like to hear back from you at some point in the future.
Hey, I'm ready to talk. Whoever wants to talk.
I don't see any questions, so we're going to move on to Mr. Luke Martin.
No questions.
Oh, Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Susie.
Absolutely.
You said just towards the end of your testimony there that people are just now starting, but you didn't specify who, as far as getting back in touch with you regarding some of these issues.
No one from the Secretary of State's, if that's what you're trying to ascertain from that. No one in an official capacity has really reached out to. Just some people have been interested in hearing the story when I was called to the state legislature, but nobody in an official capacity has reached out to take my affidavit, my concerns.
Did you have any executive branch interactions with anyone? Did you complain to investigators, or have you contacted the Secretary of State's office to issue your complaint?
So I have called several of the numbers that I was told, and I've emailed my affidavits and my complaints to a lot of people, and I've had no follow-up.
Among those, a lot of people, I'm sorry for being very specific. Among those, a lot of people were the Secretary of State's office?
The Secretary of State, I was never given access to that, but I know that my complaint was passed along by someone, supposedly. I spoke to several GOP people as well.
Thank you, Mr. Susie. Mr. Martin.
Hey, thank you so much, Morris, for your donation and all your support. I really appreciate you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Luke Martin. I am the Floyd County Republican Party chairman. And during the November 3rd election and the recount and the audit that followed the election, I served as a partisan observer. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee, and I'm happy to testify because here in Floyd County, we experienced some real tangible issues that resulted in about 3,000 ballots that were not counted on election night, and they weren't discovered until much later. So I hope to bring that perspective to you, that there really is a problem out there that resulted in lawfully cast ballots not being counted. But first, just on election night, or even prior, our Board of Elections, our elections office failed to notify both parties about when they were going to begin counting the absentee ballots. So they were counted without any kind of partisan or public observation. And that's not for our lack of trying either. Me and representatives of the Democratic Party appeared at the election board meetings. We were told that they'll get the dates to us. That just never happened. So that's how we started out, not being able to observe absentee ballots, period. On election night, we tried to enter into the county administration building where the elections office is and where they were counting the ballots, and the doors were locked. I don't think that they locked the doors on purpose or out of malice at all. I just think that they didn't understand their responsibilities to the public and to the parties to allow the observation. We were eventually able to get in, and we had observers in the administration building. But again, that's just kind of building on to some of the failures with our office. They ran into some significant problems on election night. Basically, the people who were actually counting the ballots, the chief clerk and the computer tech, the Dominion tech, whenever we'd have a write-in ballot, and it would go to the machine, it would kick out the whole ballot basically, and it was supposed to count everything but the write-in race and leave that write-in for adjudication if necessary, but instead they didn't know how basically to sort it. And there was an ability to sort it. Other counties, had write-ins as well, but basically our people were untrained and didn't understand how to use the system, and in some cases their own system, because the Dominion Tech was there. So on election night, we only had about 17% of our ballots reporting, and I think we had about 40,000 votes cast. So only about 17% on election night, and that's unfortunately not unusual for us in Floyd County. We're typically one of the last in the state. So there was that issue, but eventually the vote totals were certified, and the risk limiting audit was ordered, and that happened. The elections office was very good about allowing the partisan observation for the hand count, the audit. So I'll give them credit for that. And during certification of those results, or review of those results, they found 2,700 roughly ballots that weren't counted. So representatives from the Republican Party, the public, the Democratic Party, we all rushed to the elections office to see what was going on. And so basically what we figured out our actual problem was why these ballots weren't counted. It came from an early voting precinct, one of our 2 early voting precincts that were open at the time. And the scanner, you cast your vote, the printer right by the box prints out your vote, you take it to the scanner, and you scan it through. Well, that scanner apparently wasn't working. The elections office knew it wasn't working, so that data was not getting transferred to the memory card. So what they did was they allowed that scanner, that box, to get full, and then they removed those ballots, approximately 5,000 of them, and then we're going to put them through scanner number 2. And they did that. They scanned those ballots. We still don't know if someone just forgot to scan half of them, a human error, or if they were scanned and then somehow not counted in the system. We're really not sure. We weren't able to figure that out. But basically, yeah, they weren't counted. The risk limiting audit, the hand count, discovered that. So what we did was the Secretary of State's office allowed us to recertify those totals with the appropriate amount. So we did that. Thankfully, those were caught. But we ended up with another problem during this recount. Just a few weeks ago, we discovered that in the risk limiting audit, they counted 300 ballots twice. And so the certified totals we got wrong twice, both times we certified it. So basically what happened was we had 2 early voting precincts. As I said before, there was a box of those paper ballots. They counted them twice, one for each early voting precinct. So our hand count revealed 2,700 uncounted ballots, but then the certified total was 3,060 higher than the machine certified totals from election day. So we messed that up twice in Floyd County, and I believe human error. I think it was a lack of training and education from our elections office that led to those errors, and that's really why I wanted to testify today, because I understand the absentee ballot process. I understand how the signatures are verified, and I understand why the Secretary of State is not calling for a signature audit. Basically, our law doesn't provide any instructions on who pays for it, how to do it, what happens if a certain percentage of signatures are rejected in the signature audit. So what I saw on election night, the audit, the hand count, and in my dealings with the elections office was that human error can lead to some serious problems. It led to roughly 3,000 uncounted ballots. And unfortunately, those same people who did that are the ones responsible for the final tabulation of the signatures. When the absentee ballots come in, they're the ones verifying. I think the public and the parties just need an opportunity to be able to observe that. And I would ask this committee to recommend some changes to our laws in that respect. I think we need to have the ability to conduct a signature audit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I have a couple of questions if you are willing to take Representative Oliver. You had a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Am I remembering correctly that the election director of Floyd County was fired after this election of November 3rd? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, ma'am, he was.
Is that evidence that the system worked, that your election board took action, or do you oppose him being fired?
I think that was a step in the right direction. He basically was new in the office. He had only been around for this election cycle. Our problems lasted before him, and since he's been gone, we counted the 300 votes twice. So we still continue to have problems, but I am grateful that the board took that step, and I think it was a step in the right direction.
You supported the step and they took responsible action in your view.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Lumsden had a question. Do you still have a question, Representative Lumsden?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. No, I was just going to ask Mr. Martin, the things that he observed relative to the things going on in Floyd County had more to do with the lack of training or lack of process, more so than just in human error, more than the system itself. Is that my understanding of what you've told us here today?
Yes, sir. I think the problems that I saw, even starting from the failure to notify the public and the parties about when they were counting absentee ballots, that was out of a lack of training and education on behalf of the elections office. They didn't know how important that was, and that just wasn't on their list of priorities. I think on election night, when they were trying to sort out the write-in issue in the computers, it was because they didn't know the settings basically to check. So they weren't trained on that. I know for a fact, because I was there, they tried to get in touch with the Secretary of State's office that night. I was there when they were trying to call them. They didn't receive any help in troubleshooting that issue on election night, so it wasn't resolved until later. But yes, sir, I'm Representative Lumsden. I believe that our issues in Floyd County are the result of a lack of training and education in our elections office.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Appreciate you being with us today. Going to move on to Mrs. Giddens out of Ware County, another poll watcher. Ms. Giddens, are you with us? I know you were having some technical difficulties. It looks like maybe we need to, can we unmute her? There we go. Ms. Giddens, are you with us?
Hey, yes, Deborah Giddens, I'm from Ware County. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Please, thank you for being with us. Please continue.
Well, in Ware County, I'm the secretary of the Ware County Republican Party. I'm a member of the state committee of the Georgia GOP, and I'm also an officer of the 1st Congressional District Republican Party. And I have been a poll watcher for early voting for the November 3rd general election, and I also was a poll watcher on election day. In Ware County, a number of Republicans have had concerns about whether or not all the signatures on the absentee ballots were verified. And in a conversation when I've been down at the Board of Elections office, because I was there many occasions, that's primarily where I worked during early voting. I chatted with the supervisor about were the signatures being checked. Well, I never really got a straight answer, but on Wednesday, December 2nd, which was a little over a week ago, I had a meeting with the Ware County Supervisor of Elections in his office down at the board. And so I asked him whether or not, that I wanted to know for sure whether or not all of the signatures on the absentee ballots for the November 3rd election were checked and verified. And so he stated to me that most all of the signatures were checked. And he stated that sometimes they really got behind because they had a lot of people in line to vote for early voting. And then like the post office would deliver a large number of ballots all at once and they got behind and they weren't able to check all of them. So You know, my issue and my concern is that the checking of verifications of the signatures on the absentee ballots. So be open for questions if anybody has a question. It was my understanding that all of the signatures are supposed to be verified, but in my county, just most all of them were.
Any questions from committee members? I'm not seeing anybody. Ms. Giddens, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for being concise and with your testimony.
And our numbers, I assume, are certified by now because we got different numbers every time, each of the 3 times that they were counted. Election night, the hand count, and then the machine recount. But I think all of that was, I guess, reconciled, and the numbers should have been turned in for certification at the Secretary of State's office.
Well, all right, got it. Well, thank you again. Did you have anything else to add, Ms. Giddens?
Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions at any time if there are any questions. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And we'll circle back up with you if anybody does present any at a later date or later today. I believe next is Miss Jan Barton out of Cobb County. Miss Barton, are you on? I see her. We may have to unmute her. Ms. Barton?
Oh, hello. I apologize. I thought I was unmuted. Here I am. Thank you so
Technology
much.
can mess us all up sometimes, zooming in. So thanks for being with us. And you want to tell us a little bit about your situation?
Yes, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jan Barton. I live in Marietta, Georgia, in Cobb County. I was an observer for the recent recount. I'm here today to testify that our voting system is broken, and I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. I will briefly cover 4 personal examples of why our sacred right to vote is in question. And I must say the very idea that Georgians are expected to use the same flawed voting machines and flawed process for the runoff election and any future elections is unreasonable and a threat to secure elections. I have 4 points. Number 1, the objectionable activities that happened in Cobb County, including the shredding of white privacy envelopes for absentee ballots. I had an email from Cobb Election Director Janine Eveler confirming that was quote unquote all that they shredded, that no ballots were shredded. However, the white privacy envelope is part of the package of items required by Georgia law to be saved for 21 months after an election. Otherwise, how can we be certain each ballot arrived in the mail rather than by some other devious means? The election director's first statement appeared in East Cobb News on November 20th. The shredding activity occurred on November 18th. The timing of shredding alone did not make for good optics. Why then? Number 2, I was an observer of the second recount, the rescanning of ballots in Cobb County on Tuesday, December 1st. We were not allowed to be close to the tables. I think the closest one to me was about 10 feet away. At 2:39 p.m., I noted this in my notes, I observed a very flat, perfect stack of what I was told were absentee ballots with no folds being scanned. They were perfect. I was not able to take a photo quickly enough before they put them back in the box, but I did make note of the batch and the box number. If election workers have nothing to hide and everything is perfectly above board, why are observers kept so far away from the activities and not allowed to ask questions? Number 3, I also helped an independent team working to document the new hand counts in the first audit. It was those numbers that discovered the Ware County anomaly. Many volunteers and many hours went into efforts to protect our votes. Isn't it a shame that we have to do that and that we cannot trust our voting system? Number 4, and final point and a few closing points after this. On Tuesday this week, I found out that my name and information were unmasked as part of the hammer and scorecard operation that Sidney Powell and others have mentioned. This was presented on the Brannon House show. Dennis Montgomery is the brilliant guy who created Hammer and Scorecard to protect American citizens. Hello?
Mr. Chairman.
Hello?
Turner.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. And I don't mean to be rude here, but is it really the intention of our committee at this point, to hear testimony about Hammer and Scorecard, a fantastical conspiracy theory? I would rather use our time in a more effective way, frankly.
Excuse me.
Well, Representative Turner,
citizen.
hold on just a second. Let me jump in here real quick. I know that we don't necessarily always see things exactly the same way, any of us on this call, but Ms. Barton, I know that that you're testifying, I think, to what you believe to be accurate. We will let you finish your time, and then if there are questions, then we can do that. We can do that at that time. Thank you.
All right. I do totally resent being interrupted and just discounted in that manner. In conclusion, we cannot trust our current voting system. Our entire free republic is in danger. The irregularities in our voting system and processes must be remedied before this runoff election. We ask that our legislators do the right thing and hold a special session and put forth the right electors as provided in the U.S. Constitution. We also ask that you consider using a hand-marked paper ballot system. Procedures are already in place for emergency paper ballots. The scanners will work with that process. The touch screens can be removed. This process meets Georgia law for a reliable paper trail, and every voter will know that their vote was counted. Your actions can save our free republic and ensure the sacred right to vote. This is our time to say what President Reagan called that shining city on the hill. We ask our legislators to do the right thing. The world is watching. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. I believe our next person to testify is Mrs. Sherry Okun from Dekalb County. Is that, I probably did not get that pronunciation right either.
Yes, but somebody stopped my video, so I need to be able to show, I need to start my video.
Huh.
Okay. There we go. How you doing? Thank you guys so much for letting me be here. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, ma'am. Let's just tell us where you're from and you may proceed.
Okay, great. I'm from Dunwoody, Atlanta, DeKalb County. So a family member and I voted early and in person on October 19th at the Dunwoody Library in DeKalb County. You know, I'm going to share my screen because I got a couple things to host disabled participants. I need to be able to share my screen to show you guys a couple things. Can the host allow me to share my screen, Molly?
Yes, we would just, make sure we don't, again, mention names when we're doing some of those things, testimony, or show them.
You should have access now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Can.
Okay, so let's see if I can share my screen. That's not what I wanted to show you. Okay, so when we voted early, we voted on these touch screens, just like you're seeing here. The piece of paper came out, and right after that, a poll worker said to me, well, greeted us and looked at our ballots. And he said to me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be looking at who you voted for, even though it was showing right on the top of my screen. Right on the top of my piece of paper ballot, but I need to see the QR code on top of it to see which scanner to send you to. The same poll worker did this to everybody that was there. My family member and I were both sent to the same scanner. The other people in our fairly blue district before me and after me were directed to the other scanner after the poll worker looked at their ballots. We both voted for Trump. They probably didn't. I attended the Sidney Powell rally at Wills Park last week or whenever it was. And I got up and asked the audience, hundreds of people were there, if anyone else had had this experience, because one of the congressmen recently told me it was illegal for them to be looking at my ballot. And many people, I'd say 1 out of 20 raised their hand. Many people came up to me afterwards and said that it happened to them. A woman told me that she took her 85-year-old mother to her precinct, and it happened at her mother's precinct where they looked at the top of the paper to tell them which scanner to use. But it didn't happen at her own precinct because there was only one scanner. So after I spoke at that rally, several of my friends, some of which are from Dunwoody and voted at the same place that I did, the Dunwoody Library, texted and called me and said, yeah, that happened to me. It was very strange. So, it's illegal, and there must be good reason for this. I strongly encourage every one of you, and I hope I don't get cut off here because this is factual information. I encourage every one of you to look at the Democracy Suite ImageCast Central User Guide, May 31st, 2019, on the Secretary of State's website. It is right here, okay? This is it. And you will notice that on page 18, it instructs users how to re-zero the tabulator to, quote, clear the scanned ballot results and remove all processed batches. Chapter 4, page 24, right here, is entitled Poll Worker Mode, and it allows Dominion workers to set the scanners to either accept, this is, quote, accept or discard batches, end quote, while it's running, which kind of sounds a lot like what may have happened in Floyd County, and we don't know how many other counties. So page 25 and 26 instruct users how to manually discard batches. Are y'all there? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We've got you.
Okay, good. So I want to continue. So with the batches,
Oh, we lost your audio. We lost your audio.
to the bottom, were emptied without following procedure, chain of custody, and that the ballots, which are basically pieces of paper with our picks on them but no signature, were taken out. The ballots that were taken out were not labeled or locked, and some of them were stored in unmonitored warehouses in Fulton County haphazardly. And even that some of those bags of ballots were put in the back of a Dominion worker's car. So when in our history, I ask you guys, when in our history has a voting booth company been present at our polling places let alone managing them, and holding power over these election officials, staying after they have left for the night in our townships, our cities, our counties, and all across the states in America. When has that ever happened? Never. And how were the Dominion friends, I heard people testify to, Dominion friends and family allowed on site and our sacrosanct voting process to quote unquote help? So now I'm going to move on to something else. There was illegal curing of ballots occurring after the election. Let's go to Gil Freeman's, well, let's go to this real quick. Gil Freeman at Guilford, Georgia, posted this on November 4th. 40,000 rejected vote by mail ballots in Dekalb County need to be cured by Friday, or they will be tossed, mismatched signatures, etc. Now, when you look on fact, he deleted this tweet, but if you look up online on factcheck.com, they say it's not true. That didn't happen. Well, here's Gil Freeman's Twitter page, live Twitter page right here. So we go to November 4th and look at what we have. We have him saying, help voters over the next few days to cure their absentee ballots and provisional ballots so that every vote is counted. We're recruiting canvassers. So you click on this and look where it takes you.
Ms. Okun,
Yeah.
if you please, we're trying not to share names.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
But I need to show you this because it's very important. On November 4th, the Georgia Democrats created this Georgia Cure Canvasser Recruitment Phone Bank. Help us recruit Cure canvassers in Georgia. All you need to join is a computer and a telephone. We will be calling on volunteers in Georgia and asking them to knock on doors to help voters through the process of curing their ballots. The deadline to cure ballots is Friday, November 6th. Let's fight. Okay, so that's this, okay? And Georgia code, as you all know, it allows ballots the chance to be cured for certain reasons, failure to sign oath, various things. So right out of 419C2, there are, to facilitate cures, Georgia law allows the relevant election official to notify the voter in writing. This is a quote right from our laws. The Board of Registrars or absentee ballot clerk shall promptly notify the elector of such a rejection, a copy of which notification shall be retained in the files of the Board of Registrars or the absentee ballot clerk for at least 2 years. If they want to cure their ballots, they have to fill out an affidavit with a provisional ballot. So volunteer canvassers are not, and phone bank callers and door knockers set up by the Georgia Democrat Party after the election ended on November 3rd to canvass Georgia. That's illegal. Who gave the Democrats the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the Georgia absentee voters that had not returned ballots? I mean, that had not filled out their ballots correctly. I'm wondering if it's the same people that gave those names to the ACLU. On November 6th, Hillary Clinton.
I don't mean to interrupt you. We've got a minute or two.
Okay, so all right, I'll finish real quick. I went to this on November 6th. Hillary Clinton posted this. I went to this site, democrats.org/Georgia-ballot. I went there. It asked me to upload my signature. It asked me to upload my voter information on my signature. Just to be clear, it did not take me to the SOS website to see if my absentee ballot was cured or was accepted. It asked, so they were literally, the Democrats were literally November 4th, 6th, 5th, procuring people I know people who went to this site and uploaded their signatures, and there's nothing in Georgia law that allows for an electronic upload of signatures to cure an absentee ballot. It's affidavit only. And the next thing I'm going to show you and tell you is that the day after the election, a family member called me, texted me, and let me know that they checked my absentee ballot status and it showed unavailable. That family members also showed unavailable on the SOS system. We checked several other Republican voters that we know, and every one of them showed absentee ballot status is not available. Then we checked several Democrats that we know, and every single one of them showed accepted. My question is, why? And at Wills Park, many people also told me that they had the same issue. They're Republicans and they voted, and it showed the day after the election that their absentee ballot status was unavailable. So that's a little scary. The last thing I'm going to tell you is that most, if not all years that I voted prior to 2016, I voted Democrat. My initial registration would have been Democrat. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We're kind of at 13 minutes.
Okay, so I just want, so the family member that lives in my house is a registered Republican. I received calls and texts nonstop prior to the election from Democrats and quote unquote nonpartisan groups using Stacey Abrams' name in the headline urging me to vote. They knew my name and my voter information. My family member, the Republican, received no calls or texts from the Democrat Party or the purported nonpartisan groups. And this is the kicker. I, as the registered Democrat, received at least 8 absentee ballot applications to my house, to me only. They were perforated with 2 ballot applications on every single one of them. And my family member, the Republican, received, and that was all from the Secretary of State's office. My family member, the Republican, received nothing, 0, nothing from the SOS. And that's it. That's my testimony. I'm sorry but you guys, I mean, the Georgia Democrat Party created a canvassing group to knock on doors after the election to cure ballots, to make phone calls, and that is illegal.
Mr. Kuhn, I appreciate your time. I will say this and kind of reiterate it, that I regret that we don't have, we only have so many slots and so much time.
Oh, yeah. I just want to make sure you guys realize, because there's no law and order. There's none.
Right. So we got Mr. Joe Sapp from Pulaski County. Mr. Sapp, are you with us?
I am representing.
Hey, thank you so much, Julie, for your donation and all your support. I really appreciate you. Come on, guys, we gotta hit them likes up. The more likes that we get in a short period of time, the more people the algorithm will bring into the chat. If you're new here, please subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell icon. If you want to stay connected and make sure you never miss another live, join the Discord. Thank you guys for being here.
In the physical therapy business, and anytime that I get a number from a restricted, call from a restricted number, I answer it, because more than likely it's a physician with some concern or whatever. So I answered a restricted call, and the lady proceeded to tell me who she was with. I couldn't remember the name of the organization. And she called, she said, "Is this Joseph?" And I said, "Yes, this is Joseph Sapp." And she says, "I'm calling to see, we noticed that your absentee ballot has not been received yet." And I was, at the time, I knew that I had not requested an absentee ballot, but I put 2 and 2 together that my son, who is also Joseph Sapp, that lives in, he's a senior at UGA, she was referring to him. And she says something to the effect of Athens. And she says, "Have you sent your absentee ballot in yet?" And I said, "Correct. Yes, as far as I'm concerned, they should be receiving it." And she says, "Well, if it hasn't been sent yet," she said, "I'll be glad to send a representative by to get that ballot from you and put it in one of the drop boxes if you're unable." And at the time, I didn't think anything about it. I just said, "No, it's no big deal. We got it covered." And that was pretty much the essence of that conversation. However, you know, again, after the election, speaking with different people, I was like, that didn't seem right. So I called my son and I asked him, and, he said that a lot of his friends in Athens had received.
Mr. Sapp, your audio went out.
Can you hear me?
We missed the last few seconds, but yes, sir, now we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just saying that my son a lot of his friends had received the similar calls, and I think that they were just kind of going after his age demographic, trying to get those absentee ballots in, and whether they were trying to control what was on those absentee ballots or not, I don't know, but it was definitely unnerving that this lady even had that information and called me and asked it to come pick the ballot up. Sorry.
No, thank you. It's an interesting testimony. Was there any questions from the committee members? Representative Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Sapp.
Yes.
For sharing your story.
Yes, sir.
And the same question I've asked several other witnesses. Have you, first of all, did you record the phone number of the person that was sending that information to you? Or trying?
No, it came through. Again, it was listed as restricted. I mean, I don't answer phone calls if it comes from a number that I do not recognize or any potential spam. But if it says restricted, I always answer it because odds are it's a physician. So I happen to answer this. I went back and looked through my phone records, on my phone. And again, it doesn't give a phone number. I haven't gone back and looked at my phone records, through Verizon. I don't know if that's something that can be traced in any way to come back to a specific phone number, but right now there's no phone number.
And outside of the hearing today, have you reported this to any authority?
Not to any authority. I've spoken to a few representatives and just friends of mine that would be in the know-how, but I would be glad to do that and be under oath in doing so, but I haven't done that yet, but I will if you think it would help.
I would encourage you to do that if you believe that the law has been broken. I think that's the appropriate way to proceed. That's me personally.
Sure.
You do what you need to, sir. Thank you for your questions, for answering the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sapp. Appreciate you being on with us today. And,
great, thanks a lot.
We can help get you an affidavit if that's what you'd like to do is sign.
I will. I'll follow back up. I appreciate it a lot.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Eli Valund is a voter out of Spalding County. Are you with us, sir?
Yes, it's ma'am. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Again. I'm so sorry. So sorry. Ms. Valund, am I saying that correctly?
That's
Did I do something or we lose?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, good now. Yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry.
No, excuse me.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
So I might just have to.
We can hear you.
Okay. So, okay, perfect. On November 3rd, election day, my husband and I went to vote. And we actually had to go to two different locations. I went to the senior center, and upon arrival, we got there, and we were told that all of Spalding County's system, I don't know, electric system or their system went down. So we were told that we had to fill out a provisional ballot, which was fine at the time, or it seemed fine at the time. I mean, I thought it was a little interesting, but no surprise. So so we did that. And then my husband, he had to go across the way to the Lutheran church. And once he got there, he said the system had gotten back up. So he did it electronically. And I had gone to check my vote, kind of similar story to maybe some other people, check my vote on the GA, check your status. And it doesn't show that I voted. So, nor my husband, nor a lot of other people that I voted on election day in Spalding County. So, but other people who had voted, because I had checked a lot of people's ballots, they'd asked me to because I was curious. So, like some friends of mine and like a mother figure, and all their statuses showed that they had voted and that their, vote had been counted. And still to this day, my vote doesn't show that it's been counted. So I have been in contact with my local representative quite a few times to really just to find out, like, how do I find out if my vote counted or my husband's vote counted? I did call the elections office probably every 3 or 4 days to check. They told me the day after, 2 days after maybe election day, that it was going to take them 14 days to get any sort of information, or that my vote would be posted, which it still has never posted. So, so I don't know. I'm still kind of looking for answers. I'm not sure that my vote has been counted still. And also, subsequently, my mother was here from Florida, and I used to live in Florida 5 years ago. She said, because now I have been receiving absentee applications for the runoffs and receiving like 2 and 3 in the mail here. And my mother was up here visiting us because I just had a baby. And she said, that's really funny because before the presidential election, you had received a ton of absentee ballots applications down in Florida, which I just thought, to me, it's just an unsolicited, like I didn't ask for, I've never voted absentee ballot ever. The last time I voted was here in Griffin or here in Spalding County. So it was just a little, again, odd to me. And I'm still kind of digging and trying to figure out where my vote is. And that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you and congratulations. Did I hear you say you just had a baby?
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations, y'all. Thanks again for being with us today. Is there anybody who has a question? I'm not seeing any. Well, again,
How do I?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
do you
sure.
know who? So sorry. How do I get more information, or where do I go? Who do I ask? Because to find out if my vote, where my vote is. Again, I said I called my state representative. I called the elections office, but I'm not making a little bit of headway. This seems like it's headway to me, like today, which I'm very grateful for. But I'm not very versed in all of this, but I'm also very curious as to where my personal vote is, selfishly.
Molly, if you'll get a link, we'll email her, and My Voter Page is a good start. Representative Turner, you wanted to?
Yeah, if I might, election day voting is not showing up on absentee. I believe the concern here is you're looking for an absentee ballot and you're actually checking, or you're looking for an election day ballot that was cast and you're looking on the absentee ballot page. Unless I'm misunderstanding, but that's the reason why you won't find an election day cast ballot on the absentee database.
Okay, even if it's a provisional?
Yes, ma'am. It's handled differently than an absentee. It's a different process, but you would be able to determine through asking your local elections office if your ballot counted.
Can I go there in person?
You can go there in person or call them or email them, and they'll be able to tell you the status of your vote.
Okay, and they can show me because I want to see it.
Well, they won't be able to show you your personal ballot.
Not your ballot.
Not your ballot, but that you did cast a ballot.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yes, ma'am. They'll be able to tell you that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Representative Turner. Thank you, Ms. Falloon. Next, Representative Wynn had contacted me. I know we were asking for recommendations this week from committee members, and we had not received any from our Democratic colleagues, but she did contact me, and we had somebody from Fulton County that was a late ad, and so I wanted to ask, is it Miss Cooley? Cooney, I'm sorry, if she's with us, and
I am.
if she could testify. Please, you may proceed, Miss Cooney. Thanks for being with us.
All right. Tell me what kind of remarks you would like from me, which I have not. Do you want recommendations? Do you want findings? Do you want a narrative?
Well, if you want to just tell us, first of all, who you are, maybe what kind of, if you're a poll watcher, if you have some election experience, worker or volunteer, and then maybe if you witnessed anything or had any testimony that would be, relevant to anything we might want to look at moving forward regarding fixes to our current election law.
All right. My name is Mary Carol Cooney. That's a double first name. And I am the chairperson of the Fulton County Board of Elections. I have served in that capacity for just shy of 7 years, and this is my second presidential election that I have conducted as chairperson. I do not have any firsthand knowledge, that is to say, things that happened to me or that I have personally witnessed comparable to the other speakers that I have heard within the last hour. So there are two things I could tell you, and you can tell me if you are interested in either of them. And one of them is what my board is doing or prepared to do about similar complaints that have, and other observations that have been made to us in this morning at our monthly election board meeting and in the recent past. I can tell you about that. And I can also give you a reason why I'm not going to be very satisfactory, but what I think we have to keep in mind about what fixes to make to the system. Now, I will assume you will just let me speak. So
yes,
you
ma'am.
can cut me right out.
Yes, ma'am.
I listened to our own public comments this morning, and I read many emails that we also received concerning the conduct of the November 3rd elections. I read and heard concerns about alleged illegalities, lax practices, insecurity of ballots, and some specific things like suitcases of ballots hidden under tables, water leaks, counting ballots without partisan party observers being present, and lawsuits that have been filed. We take those seriously. I take them seriously. What can we do? We want to know what was wrong or lax or negligent, and at least ensure that going forward, these things are fixed and will not be repeated. But what we need to do in reviewing what happened that was bad is to review it well. A fundamental principle of investigations and of democratic government is that you don't investigate yourselves. What you get if you do that is what's called measurement bias. The person taking the measurement has a bias one way or another, and it does not do well for an impartial conclusion. A local government agency is not authorized or compelled by law to issue subpoenas, compel testimonies, cross-examine witnesses, issue rulings, or impose penalties. The Secretary of State's office is. Routinely, after any election, the Secretary of State notifies my board of alleged misfeasance, nonfeasance, or neglect. We appear before them and we either enter into a consent order or tell them that we want to have a trial. We do not have the authority or resources, and we certainly have nobody on our staff who is designated as an investigator to do what would be required to do it well. I'm reluctant to undertake what cannot be done well. Given this determination by me, I made inquiries of the Secretary of State's office and spoke with their chief investigator, as well as with members of our staff who have been questioned by either the Secretary of State's office or the GBI. In speaking with the Secretary of State's office, I learned that they are conducting 250 investigations right now, only a very small portion of which pertain to Fulton County. I asked specific questions about specific complaints brought to my attention and allegations made, and I was told as to each of them that they were under active investigation. This is where it should be. Moreover, I am informed that they are nearing the end of what they need to do, although I am not putting any deadlines on them. So I think that we are being investigated. We are being investigated by the entity that has that power and authority. And I will also tell you, based on the discussion among members of my board, that this should and will not be where the matter rests. My board put me on notice this morning that whatever happens will be immediately shared with the board, and we will make up our minds as to what we need to do. We want the, I also, as board chairman, at the end of the year, think about what our board needs to do better in the coming year. And I thought about undertaking that discussion. And at this year's end, I came up with a couple of things that will make us perform better. One is to have elections without brand new voting infrastructure and software, which is what we had this year and with which we had considerable difficulties. I would want us to have elections without a pandemic. This really was an obstacle for us. You may have heard that we actually had staff members die, and yet their compatriots went right back to our offices and kept working. Nonetheless, it very much slowed us down. We would like elections without 100,000 voters deciding to use absentee ballots for the first time, as facilitated by the state, but not facilitated and not put into place with any time or prior planning by us. All of these things would make elections better. There are things that you have heard, and I'm sure you will hear about illegalities, but I would ask you to consider the obstacles under which we operated and whether those obstacles can be alleviated in the coming year by some time to put procedures into place. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Cooney. Do you mind if we take we take a couple questions?
Sure.
Chairman Powell, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question of this person testifying, but I would like to make a comment before we finish the day.
Yes, sir. We'll allow the committee members to enter some comments in before we adjourn. I know Secretary Williamson, you had a question? You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Carol Cooney, thank you for your testimony. Mine's a very simple question. Would you have any objection at all to having bipartisan signature observers for the signature verifications on the inbound ballots in the upcoming election as requested by many members of the General Assembly?
By bipartisan observers, I assume you are meaning 2 observers.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We discussed that this morning. Easier said than done. Definite problems with getting it done for the January 5th election, and that comes down to money, time, and space. We will need to have twice as many observers as we have had in the last election. We will need to find them, put them in place, and we will need to ensure that they have enough space in the places that we have set up to do so. Now, do I know the answers as to whether those obstacles can be overcome? I do not, but I do know that they are real obstacles, and we need, well, as I said, I have a bias, and it is that if I'm going to undertake something, I want it done well. And it is not 100% certain at this time that we can do this in the near term.
Do you have any objection at all into at least exploring that? Do you have any philosophical objection?
It is being done as we speak. This was why I could not appear earlier. It was the subject of our discussion this morning.
So you support the concept as long as the money and time and adequate spacing is available?
I don't know why not at this time. Perfect. But as with everything, I would like to have it in front of me. But we seriously discussed that, and there are several members of our board who really want to move forward with it, and I support them.
Thank you.
Representative Jones had a question, and then we'll move on to Mr. Favorito.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. Ma'am, thank you so much for your candor. It's actually highly appreciated. Your demeanor could have been completely different, but instead you were very open. So I thank you for that. My question is this: as this committee is reflecting on November 3rd, thinking about January 5th to Representative Williamson's question, and then also getting prepared to see what we should be doing to get prepared for 2022, given the fact that you head up the largest county within the state of Georgia, do you look at other states, other counties that are in similar size, similar demographics, and see who is basically doing the best practice to see what you could possibly bring to Fulton and maybe even recommend to the entire state? Or is that something that isn't necessarily done within your purview?
It is not necessarily done within our purview. We have looked at agencies from other states, and let me tell you what I mean. The business of absentee by mail is actually pretty new to Georgia. I have discovered that it is really in the western states that those have been put into practice, places like Utah and Colorado. I have not spoken with the heads of local county election boards in those states or in others out west, but I have spoken to persons who have undertaken that function. And one of them, actually several of them, have said to me that it takes years to have a good absentee by mail function in place. And we have listened to them. Whether we accept what they say, we have not done yet, because we were, as I said a little bit earlier, kind of thrown into it in the middle. But we have spoken to them. When we hired our present elections director, I also became aware, he was from Texas. We seem to be looking to people from the West. I found that in different regions of the country, there are different systems in place. And we hired him because at that time, Fulton County and the state had hardly any early voting. So we addressed early voting. I think we've got some great early voting this time. We are going to have 30 early voting locations on before the January 5th election, plus buses, which you may have heard of, RVs to go where there's a specific need, plus outreach places. We're going to have 38 drop boxes. We're going to cover that. But there are other things that we don't have. We are aware. I told my husband this would happen, and I am sorry. And we do know some things, but not anything I can tell you definitively or conclusively that we have learned that we will adopt. We only know them.
Thank you. And if I could just ask, notwithstanding the K-9, and you don't need to answer an email to the chairman, would be perfectly fine. But what I'd love to get is just a very quick answer to these two things. One, you just mentioned 35 plus boxes. Are they all being under video surveillance? And two, could you please ask Fulton's attorneys under which part of the code section are the buses authorized? And if you could just get that, again, I don't want to take too much time, Mr.
Easy
Chair.
answer to the second one. I don't know how the two outreach buses are authorized, really outreach RVs. They're very big. For
RVs.
the first question about the drop boxes, there are 38 of those, and those are authorized under Rule 183-1-14-0.6-14 of the State Election Board rules, which is entitled Secure Absentee Ballot Drop Boxes, which lays it all out for us.
Correct. I appreciate that. And if you could send that, I'm fully aware of that section. And if you could send things to the chairman, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Cooney, is that right though? It's a mobile polling location?
It is a mobile polling location, and we have 2 of them, and we can use them for well, we have 2 things in mind. One is if there is an emergency, and we do have emergencies. We do have sewer backups in polling places, things like that. We can dispatch a bus there so that people can vote instead of simply being turned away. And also, if we are aware of very long lines, we can dispatch one of those RVs. I have not actually voted in one, but I've seen one in operation at Morningside Baptist Church in Midtown, and it was functioning beautifully prior to the November election.
Representative Wynn and Representative Oliver have asked to ask questions. Representative Wynn, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cooney, I was just going to ask, there are a lot of allegations that were made about Fulton County elections, both in testimony in this committee today and you know, all over the news cycle. So would you be willing to send the members of the committee in writing just the response that Fulton County has in regards to those specific allegations? You named some of them today, the water break, the disruption of counting of the ballots. But specifically, if you're able to answer one question for me today, one of the allegations is there were truckloads of fake ballots that were added to Fulton County's election result. Can you respond to that allegation specifically?
I just spoke to you about my reluctance to do so when somebody with credentials has undertaken that. And I know that specific question is under investigation by the Secretary of State's office. I think that it is nearing conclusion. I will find out where it is. But the thing about the Secretary of State's office that is better situated than us is their ability to identify and talk to a number of witnesses, to review videotape, which may or may not have been doctored, and come to conclusions which we simply do not. But I will get you an answer to that. I hope that is sufficient.
Thank you.
Representative Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want my friends on the committee to know that Mary Carol Cooney has a long civic career, president of the League of Women Voters, senior counsel to the city of Atlanta for decades. Mary Carol, you're aware that there's an existing court order on review of exact match signatures. And as a lawyer with a whole lot more skill than I, you would recognize that we could not change the terms of that existing court order in any way.
That's correct.
So the discussion about exact match signatures reviews really can't go forward until that court order is somehow amended, which of course cannot happen before January 5th. Secondly, changing the rules about review of exact match signatures would create a different set of circumstances for some voters than other voters, an equal protection argument that you would be nervous about, I'm sure, if the rules were changed.
I think that's called leading the witness, but I will accept that. No, I think that is correct. And I made a notation when Representative Jones said we're here on November the 3rd talking about an election on January the 5th. No, we're here on December the 10th talking about an election that starts on December the 14th. In terms of what we can do to change things, that is not very much at this date. We would certainly want to have all of our staff trained to do whatever a court or any other entity with authority like the State Election Board has told us to do. And I will say, having received some last minute orders or rules, that it is very difficult for us to get to the entirety, and sometimes as many as 2,000 employees, to get the word to them in time to make a meaningful difference. So we appreciate I appreciate our looking at a horizon other than January the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I would imagine we probably have more questions for you at some point, Ms. Cooney, but our time is short, and have some interest in the county there in which you chair. So thank you for being on with us. Mr. Favorito, you and Mr. Cross are last, and I'm gonna turn it over to y'all. If you don't mind, please be please be as concise as you can. The hour's late. I know we've been here a long time, and I know y'all have waited a while as well. So,
Mr. Chairman, thank you for. I need to share my screen, and it's disabled.
I just reiterate, we're asking folks not to show any names.
You should have access to share your screen now.
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that you can see my screen, so and I appreciate happy to be back with you again this year. I'm going to be as fast as I possibly can. Most of you know me, Garland Favorito. I'm a career IT professional, co-founder of Voter GA, and I'm also the elections director of the Constitution Party of Georgia. Voter GA is a nonpartisan organization that we've kind of led the election integrity movement here for 16 years. I think the real question that we need to answer today is there compelling evidence of Georgia election fraud in the 2020 general election? That's what I think we should be here for. Just to recap, how did we get here very, very quickly? On one slide, I wrote to the Secretary of State and system evaluators back in 2002 that they were evaluating possibly unconstitutional systems that could not produce verifiable, auditable, and recount capable results. The General Assembly legalized voting that could not be audited back then, and the Secretary of State ignored warnings, purchased the Debo DRE system. In 2009, the Georgia Supreme Court denied our constitutional claims. And in 2019, the U.S. District Court essentially reversed them and said that, yes, in fact, our old systems were unconstitutional. And I was right when I said that 17 years earlier. But the General Assembly legalized a new system that hides votes in barcodes. If you remember that with House Bill 316 last year that we adamantly opposed. The Secretary of State purchased the Dominion Democracy Suite 5.5 BMD system, and the U.S. District Court has already found that it does not meet Georgia law. So with that in mind, what are my roles? My roles in this election were as a State Farm Arena observer, a Fulton tabulation observer, an audit monitor, and a recount monitor in both Fulton and DeKalb counties. I'm going to skip State Farm for a minute. Fulton tabulation, as a tabulation observer, I noticed an abnormal 20,000 vote spike in Fulton County for former Vice President Joe Biden. I have an affidavit in on that. As soon as I saw that on the 5th of November, I notified elections director, the board, election board, the attorney for Fulton County, and I made an ORR, open records request for the interim results to the board that for Chairman Cooney, that Chairman Cooney chairs. I have never received a response from that one on November 5th. Moving to audit monitor, as I was an audit monitor, we noticed there were 3 boxes of 100% Biden ballots, which we thought were extremely usual. We thought we'd at least have a few in there that were different. But the thing that disturbed me most was that 4 auditors detected potentially fraudulent absentee ballots when they were auditing the hand count. They said this because they were not creased from being mailed. They were not marked with a writing instrument. They seemed to be marked with toner, and there were differences in ballot stock. I filed an open records request to view these ballots in custody of the elections, again with the board and the county attorney and the elections director and their open records request processor, but I was ignored. If we could see the ballots, I think it would resolve the dispute and we would know who won the election. But since we still can't see them, the question becomes, from my mind, how could the audit counters have found invalid ballots? So I want to race through a few slides about the State Farm Arena where I was an observer to give you a little bit of an idea. And then I want to make 3 conclusions on that, and then we're done. So this is the ballot processing room. It's very hard to understand this because it's a curved room. I tried to lay out the slides so that you could see what's going on, but there's very poor visibility from the observation area. This is where the entry door for the public entry door. There's the observation area. There's another door back here on the other side, but you can't really see much between those 2 areas. The room curves like that. So you remember at 6:07 a.m., I'm going to run through the chronology very quickly. There was a leaky toilet that was falsely reported as a water main break, and the supervisor delayed starting of the mail-in ballot processing for 2 hours. The closest toilet in that room would be back behind this wall here. But I do not know if that was the correct toilet or not. Fast forward to 8:22 a.m., a woman with blonde braids brings in a skirted table into the room. The room itself, I believe, violates Georgia law for transparency, but the skirted table, I would think, certainly should do that. At 9:30 a.m., after the delay from the water main break that never really was a water main break, it was just a leaky toilet or urinal, urinal, ballot processing began and it continued through the day. At 10 p.m., everything seems to be normal. The same woman in blonde braids, now dressed differently, came out, changed clothes with a different change of clothes, announced that the processing will stop for the night. You can see back here, the observers are present at that time. The observers are still present at 10:40, but everything has been closed up here. The monitors still stayed. And at 10:55, the monitors and the Fox 5 reporter leave, but the 4 workers still remain, at least 4, maybe more. 11:03, the woman in the blonde braids begins to pull out suitcases from underneath this skirted table. 11:04, another suitcase goes out. And 11:05, the supervisor pulls out another suitcase from under the skirted table. 11:10, the scanning of these ballots continue back here in this area where there's at least 4 scanners. They do about 3,000 an hour. The scanning continued for approximately 2 hours with no one present, all in violation of Georgia law, as near as I can tell. At 12:55, the scanners leave. After scanning approximately 15,000 to 20,000 ballots onto memory cards. And 1:35, 40 minutes later, there is a tremendous spike in the votes for Joe Biden 100,000 vote spike. See how inconsistent this is with everything else. This is the time over here on the left-hand side, and this is the votes that went up, the Biden's change and Trump's change by time frame of each of these feeds. David Cross is our next speaker. He's going to go much further into detail on this. At 1:40 a.m., the monitors returned after being notified that the counting was still going on. 15 to 20,000 or maybe even more illegal ballots have now been scanned for tabulation for the results. So there are a couple of questions. I just want to make a couple of questions and then I'll take questions. Some of the things I've heard, which are really good questions. If fraudulent ballots were scanned, why do the number of ballots cast match the number of voters voted? That's a great question. Well, first of all, they didn't actually balance. Fulton was out of balance by 300 plus. They called a special meeting and eventually returned to the State Farm Arena. Some other considerations as to why these might eventually balance. The ballot processing supervisor controls the absentee ballot tracking list. I don't think you should have the ballot processing supervisor controlling the ballot tracking list. That's a security issue. You might remember many people came to the polls and they were told that they had already voted by absentee ballot. It's pretty easy. I'm not being accusatory, but it's pretty easy to check somebody off the list if you wanted to insert a ballot. But probably more importantly, and you've already heard this testimony earlier today, Dominion has a security flaw that allows memory cards to be substituted. One of the previous witnesses pointed this out in the manual. It was a known issue with Texas, and that's why they rejected the Dominion system before we bought it. And we did put the Secretary of State on notice of that before the purchase. So there's a couple of questions here that was raised by the Secretary of State's IG. Did monitors decide to leave on their own? The video shows that the processing cease announcement, it shows it was clearly made. We can go back and look at that further if you want to. There are 2 affidavits from the monitors who confirmed that announcement. The scanning stopped before the monitors left. You saw that on the video, and the monitors returned after finding out the counting continued. Another thing that we've heard from the Secretary of State's office is that this is normal ballot processing. Well, I beg your pardon, skirted tables are not normal ballot processing. We didn't see any skirted tables in the audit or the recount that I can recall. Ballots are not hidden under tables. The normal process is they get them from the wall. You saw the wall. I can go back and show you that a little bit more later if you want to see about one interest of time. I'm moving as fast as I can. These ballots do not appear to me to be in standard suitcases. Most of the absentee ballots I saw as an observer were in boxes. They were not in suitcases. In fact, all that I can recall. The ballots were scanned onto memory cards after the monitors had left. That's a direct violation of Georgia law. I don't think anybody's going to refute that. And of course, even the curvature of the room is an issue, of obstructive view. So our question really is, why is the Secretary of State's office in a cover-up over this? And I'm going to avoid getting into the history of the false information that the Secretary of State has issued over the last few years. You might remember they said that these machines would cost less than hand-marked paper ballots. I think Fulton County can attest to the fact that that was not true. So that leaves us with a serious question now. I'm going to sum up with the compelling evidence, and I'll let everybody can make their own decision. But the auditors, we have 4 affidavits of auditors that claimed they made fraudulent ballots. I know all these people, I've seen them, and I have their affidavits. The monitors were told that the processing would stop, but it continued. There's 2 affidavits sworn for that one. The election feed shows a huge spike in Biden votes after the ballots processed. You've got 2 affidavits on that. David is going to talk to that election line fee a lot more. I think you'll be interested in that. Fulton
Thank you, Mr.
County
Draper.
has
Rita.
refused
Oh,
to
you-
show us the ballots to resolve the issue. And I've put in the open records request to do that. That would solve the problem. We could find out who won for sure, and everybody would be satisfied. It would either be, one of the other 2 candidates. You've got the video evidence. We looked at that, and you might want to check this out. But there is one of the ladies who's on the vote, in the video, has literally confessed to this on social media and prayed for forgiveness and told the public she's lying up. Now, I don't know if that is an accurate account, but it looks to me to be accurate. You can decide for yourself. I don't trust everything on social media, obviously, but it looks real to me. So I want to give you my nonpartisan perspective in conclusion. I think y'all know me very well. I fought against this bill last year with everything I had, the House Bill 316. I joined with all the Democrats and that who opposed that bill, and they were absolutely right. And I didn't vote for either one of these 2 candidates. We, as a Constitution Party representative, we ran our own write-in candidate. We couldn't get the candidate on the ballot because they wouldn't allow it. But I didn't vote for either one of these 2 candidates. So I don't have a dog in this hunt. But my nonpartisan perspective is that this steal is in fact real, and the Georgia electors belong to the President of the United States. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Cross, we'll do a couple of questions. We're long here. Mr. Cross, do you have something that you can share in a couple of minutes time, sir?
Yes, very quickly. I need to share my screen.
Can we share his screen?
Hey, thank you so much, None Such. I really appreciate the donation and all the support. Thank you.
1 second.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate you and all the support.
All right, so on the night of November 3rd, I learned that there were several states that had halted ballot counting due to glitches. And just real quickly, my name is David Cross. I own an investment management company in Duluth, Georgia, and I'm a resident of Gwinnett County. So again, on November 3rd, I learned that there were several states that had halted ballot counting, including Fulton County and in Georgia, and because of glitches with the counting devices. The next day, it seemed that Vice President Biden's votes in Georgia had magically catapulted by over 100,000 votes in the dead of night. And what you can see is it happened at 1:34, which ties in exactly with the timing of the folks that were on the security video feed. I also learned that Biden's votes had catapulted by over 100,000 votes in Wisconsin and Michigan, and there were statistical flukes in Pennsylvania as well too. Again, you can see Michigan here at 5:31, Wisconsin at 3:42 in the morning. I found the Edison Research data, pulled it all down. That's the most comprehensive data that's out there. It's not perfect, but it is the most comprehensive that's out there, and it is time-stamped. I also found that the data was time-stamped London time. So sometimes you might find these things and they look like it's got a weird time on it. You have to adjust it for the time zones. But it was pretty easy to spot states that were using Dominion systems because they all seem to have these anomalies. All right, so that got me interested in visiting down at the second recount on November 24th. And when I got down there, I observed that ballots were being run through high-speed scanners, but I couldn't see what the vote tally was for any candidate. You could not get close enough to the screens. You couldn't see it. The font was really tiny. I also observed that there was no hand counting going on, or to compare machine count versus hand count. That concerned me because I've also seen video evidence of high-speed scanners making counting errors on both small and large batches. Because I did not have a way to compare the physical versus machine counts, I began to inspect other areas of the vote counting space, including the ballot transport bags. Those are those black suitcases. I identified 9 ballot transport bags that were not secure, and they were missing the red security zip tabs. These things are made out of metal. If you want to get into one, you've got to cut it with tin snips or some strong scissors. Some of the ballot transport bags had numbers of ballots inside printed on the top of the bag. Some did not. I noticed that one bag indicated that it had 3,400 ballots on the inside. If you have 9 bags, and we assume that maybe there's some that have 0 and others that have 3,400 in them, that's an average of 1,700 bags. At 9 bags, that's 15,300 ballots that do not have proof of claim or proof of chain of custody. So 15,300 votes represents over 2.5% of Fulton County's votes, more than the difference between Biden and Trump, and more than the margin of victory in the election. Because of the failure of the chain of custody, I think Fulton County's results cannot be verified and probably should be vacated. The ballot transport bags that I saw, here's one that has no security tab on it. You can see right here that the yellow bar or the yellow arrow, there's no tab like the one on the left. Here's a close-up of the actual tag for this one. But I had noticed, I notified 3 of the recount witnesses, including Garland, about the unsecured ballot transport bags. I was told it's not possible. Those are all, they all have security tabs on them. I walked over to the other election witnesses, showed them, you know, when I got back. And when I walked over, I approached the ballot transport bags. And when I did that, I used my foot to point at one of the bags that had no security tag. When I did that, I was immediately accused of kicking the bag and told that I must leave by a hostile employee, I presume from Fulton County. Before I left, I notified a member of the press, Melina Weiskup, and her photographer about the unsecured ballot transport bag. I told them I was being ejected and asked if they could document it, and they did. Photographs were taken by her photographer, and a news story was shown on I think it was NTD. Of the ballot suitcases in the security video that Garland showed, only one potentially had a security tab because it looked like somebody had to cut one off, but none of the others did. And you can tell because the case is open without anyone having to cut tabs.
Mr. Cross, can you wrap it up in about a minute's time, please?
Very last sentence. So in conclusion, because of the irregularities and the total disregard for the chain of custody of the ballots, I believe the ballots for Fulton County could and should be disregarded in their entirety. If they are not disregarded, then a forensic inspection of the ballots should be performed, or at least the images of the ballots should be released to the public. Trustworthy elections are essential to our democracy. 30 years from now, what will you tell your children and your grandchildren that you did to defend democracy in 2020? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross and Mr. Favorito. Representative Turner, I know you had one question, and then we're going to go to summaries from members.
Ma'am, my question is for Mr. Favorito. Mr. Favorito, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen again and pulling up your slide set and go specifically to the slide where the unnamed lady is pulling the skirted table out onto the floor.
Yes, give me just a second. I'll close that out.
Mr. Garth, while you're doing that, maybe you can tell us what time did you arrive as an observer at the State Farm Arena?
I was there twice, but I am not testifying to that, what is on the clips. I'm just simply recapping what the Senate has already seen and what shocked us so vividly. I'm trying to add a little context so that you understand what's going on there based on my role as an observer. Sorry, I'm just about ready to come back up here. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Representative Turner, where did you want to go to?
Where she's pulling the table out onto the floor. I believe it might be the previous one from here. There, that's the one right there. So at 8:22 a.m., she brings this out. Were there observers in the room at this time?
Well, that's what I was getting to earlier. That's a great question. I don't, if I can back up a slide, I'll show you. That appears to be over in this area, and the observers are over in this area. And this gets to the point that I was making, and thank you for raising it. You really can't quite see from the observation area this full room because it curves around. So I don't think, possibly part of that table may have been visible based on my experience in the room, but I can almost surely say that all of it was not.
So go back to that slide with where she's moving the table out. At 8:22 a.m., she's pushing this table into position where it stays for the rest of the time, and all the other slides and all the other videos. And later on in the evening, we see people pulling the ballot boxes out from underneath that table. At this point in time, when she's placing that there are no ballot boxes, and it's pretty obvious that there are no ballot boxes present when she places the table there. Correct?
As far, nothing is really obvious, Representative Turner, because of this situation, but I think you'd have to watch the entire video. This is just one slide from it.
Sure. And people have watched the entire video, and I'm not sure what time the ballot boxes were placed there, but it wasn't before observers were in the room.
So I'm not aware that the entire video is even available. I have not seen it, but I would like to watch the whole thing.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all's testimony. Thank you for that, Mr. Favorito, Mr. Cross. Again, I wish we could have afforded everybody a lot more time. I know everybody's very sincere with their testimony, but we tried to get as many people as we possibly could that were suggested and submitted testimony via email. So just wanted to I think Chairman Powell has asked to go first, but we'll subcommittee chair for elections, and then we'll work our way through. If y'all can let me know who would like to make a few comments in closing here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, I want to thank you for chairing this meeting today. This 7+ hours has been very enlightening. I want to thank each and every one of the people that testified today. More important, I want to thank all the committee members. At the start of this discussion this morning, I had resolved myself that we needed an audit. There has not been an audit done. There's only been a recount, but there's been no actual audit done on what I perceive as the #1 area that needed to be looked at, and that was these absentee mail-in votes. For the last 5 weeks, myself, as well as most of the members of the legislature, has heard from constituents. There's been every type of conspiracy theory in the world, and I have tried to keep my mind open until I could see some evidence. That's the reason that I put so much strong faith that we do need a professional audit done. But after hearing a lot of the testimony today, that audit needs to be a step further. Not only is there a need for an audit if we can figure out who is the responsible party that can prompt such an audit, whether it takes an order from a superior court judge or otherwise, but it needs to be done. And it needs to be done post haste. But after the testimony that I have heard today, I'm even more decided that possibly that we also need to have a GBI investigation needs to be called in. One on the tape on the arena business, but also as a separate independent set of eyes, but also an audit to look at these absentee ballots, because you don't just pull hundreds of ballots out that have no creases in them. These ballots are mailed in and they're folded and placed in the envelope and signed. So to me, and I do appreciate the members of the committee of the other party, but to me, given the number of people in this state that feel that this election was not handled properly. For the sake of for the stability and the sake of this state, to reinforce the confidence in this election process, I think it would be just as important to the members of the Democratic Party as to the Republican Party to be sure that we get down to this, to try to reinstill the confidence and the faith. If not, there'll be an ongoing and continual fight from hereafter. Now, that being said, anybody that can hear what I'm saying that has a legal mind to tell me what would be the process that we need to call for a verifiable audit of these ballots that I've referred to, the absentee ballots. And secondly, to call in the GBI investigation on several of these things that need to be addressed from a separate independent audit, because this is just as important as any other type of public safety matter, because this is a basis in the foundations of our democracy.
Mr. Chairman, we'll work on getting those to you. I know that a number of different bodies have requested that similar ballot envelope audit, and then we can try to differentiate, you know, some of the testimony as to what might need further follow-up.
If I may add one last question to the chair.
Yes, sir.
There was such a flood of information that came out today that needs to be verified. Not that I don't believe anyone, but I do believe in truth, but verified. But there was a lot of things that came out today that we need to look into. One is the uniformity of these election boards, to be sure they're uniform or ever how they're appointed or chosen. Secondly, we need to look at this. Something that stood in my mind since the first testimony this morning was private money that has gone to finance some of the activities of the election boards. That is something that is paramount in my mind that needs to be looked at, because if you follow the money, then you can generally follow whatever corruption there may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, this is the 37th day after the election, and there have been court challenges filed in 8 states. In 55 to date, 55 court cases have been dismissed because there's no there. This in Georgia, we had an initial count. Joe Biden was the president elected in Georgia. We had a hand count audit, a risk limiting audit, for a second count of 5 million ballots. Joe Biden was the president elected in Georgia. We had a machine recount pursuant to statute, and for a third time, Joe Biden was elected in Georgia. Multiple cases have been dismissed here in Georgia, dismissing some of the very allegations that have been raised in this committee. But I want to say, I understand losing elections is hard. Believe me, I have a unique perspective on this committee about losing elections. And elected officials have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to the institution and to the democratic process. And that is, when you lose a competitive, narrow election, your responsibility is to make sure that you don't burn down the building on the way out. And that's what we're seeing at the presidential level. And I know 2020 has been a tough year. And I just want to say one other thing about something that deeply troubles me that happened this morning, and I hope is never normalized. I hope that every member of this committee disavows this specific testimony. But we heard a witness come before the Governmental Affairs Committee and allege that the governor of this state, a governor who I might add 38 days ago was on television for my opponent. So I'm in a unique position here, say that the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the secretary of state were engaged in an active crime of a cover-up of a crime. This is just absolute insanity. And we can't countenance it as a committee because it's absolutely insane and absurd. And giving more fuel to this fire will do no one any good. So I won't be there when you take up these in 2021, but I would say this, that changing the rules simply because you lose an election is not good policy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield for the final time.
Representative Jones, you've got your hand up. Vice Chairman Jones. Thank you, Leader Trammell.
Thank you, Chairman Blackman. I appreciate that. There are two things that I'd like to cover very quickly. I know everyone wants to basically be able to adjourn.
That guy was so butthurt. You just get that guy some Bengay.
In terms of the conversation that occurred this morning, we needed to go into recess just because of obligations that people had, and I completely respect that. But there was a conversation being had on commercial mail receiving agencies. I think one of the things that needs to be definitely understood by this committee, and to Leader Trammell's point, it will be something that we need to look at, not just in terms of what the registration looks like for January 5th, notwithstanding the comments of a previous witness, but also what we need to be doing past January 5th, and that's this. We know that 20% of the CMRA, in terms of our concern around the registration, came from only 3 facilities, even though we know 340 facilities based on the data basically contain registrants from businesses. And one of them, the first one here, is the one that's on Peachtree Street. The second one here is on 10th Street, and the third on West Paces Ferry. Why do I mention this? It's not to give UPS any type of publicity, but rather to make sure that the committee is aware that these are in fact standalone or inside of a strip plaza and not at the bottom or the basement of a multifamily unit. I respect the individual who mentioned that, but at the same time, I just want to make sure when you look at the data, it's about 95%, give or take, I'm rounding, that would be inside of, I'll say, a traditional UPS store, FedEx store, mailbox, etc., not in a multifamily. I'm happy to get you guys the data. I'm happy to get that through email because I think the entire committee is entitled to that, but just because of time, I won't do the entire blowout procedure. Secondly, I think it's imperative, to Leader Trammell's point, I will acknowledge that there should not be sour grapes, but I do believe that an audit is absolutely essential. Every business audits every year, at least those with good business practices. And I think in this case, I think it is good to take a look back and understand what went right, what went wrong, and what can we improve. And I think that's imperative. So as I look at it, if you look at the data, and I want to thank individuals out of Forsyth County who have helped me put this together, it's imperative that we look at the registration process, and it's imperative that we look at mail. And the reason we have to look at the registration process is because we have a significant challenge with basically the national change of address. When you look at what occurred over the past 10 years, we have seen a move from active to inactive based on the NCOA. We have seen that traditionally on the monthly basis, especially over the past 24 months. We have seen that, 24 months prior to April 19th, April 2019, you saw approximately 4,200 people come off of active into inactive based on the NCOA permanent address change outside of the state. That dropped precipitously in April of 2019, down to about 100 to 150 per month. Now, there could be a good reason. We know that there are federal court decisions that could have driven that. We know Eric could have driven that. I will get the data to this committee and make sure that you have it, but I think it's something that we need to be looking at. I think the second thing we need to be looking at is we know that based on the ballot request forms that were sent out by the Secretary of State, about 6.9 million, we know that about 25,000 of those had put in permanent address changes outside the state, but still voted. Again, I'm not suggesting anything nefarious. I'm not suggesting that all 25,000 of those individuals should not have voted. But what I'm saying is it's imperative for us to take a look and peek under. To Chairman Powell's point, if it's the GBI, fine. If it's another third-party entity, I'm open to that. I do not believe it has to be us, but I do believe for us not to look at it, I think absolutely does not go in terms of the oath that we took to our oath office and making sure that we have the sanctity of the vote. The last thing I'll mention, even though I have like 6 points that I'll email to each and every one of you, is the fact that we need to be concerned, and I do not believe it's a huge number, but we know through the data that after November 3rd, people have moved out of our state, have registered in new states, but are still registered here. Again, I'm not suggesting those individuals are planning on voting in Georgia. They may not have just taken the time to taken their registration off, but the SOS have not removed them, and maybe they haven't gone through the national address database yet. But we need to be looking at data anomalies like this to ensure that from a registration standpoint, the right people who are qualified, and we want all qualified citizens to vote, and we also want to make sure that mail is protected. So I'll get this data to the group. I want to be completely transparent with you, not looking to hide anything, but I do think, and I have several other points, but for the purposes of time, I won't say them, but I think it's imperative that we look at each and every one of them as a committee. Thank you, Chairman Blackman.
Thank you very much, Representative Jones. Representative Wynn.
Did you put your hand up?
It's been up.
Keep saying Representative Darling,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've heard a lot of testimony today, and there's a lot of information for the members of the committee to process. But I do want to be clear about the testimony that we have heard today, which has been unsubstantiated and rejected in courts all across our country, including in Georgia, and including by judges that were appointed by the president. The election that was conducted in the state of Georgia on November was the most secure election we've had in the state of Georgia, and we have no evidence of voter fraud, as backed up by the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor. This morning, we heard testimony to try to undermine the use of absentee ballots without any substantiated evidence. And I'd like to remind the members of the committee that this was a Republican passed initiative, the No Excuse Absentee Ballot. I know Chairman Powell didn't vote for it, but there are sitting members of our Republican legislature, including on this committee, who did vote to pass that. Taking away the right to vote by mail with no excuse is simply a voter suppression tactic. And I'd like to remind the members of the committee, the reason we saw so many Georgians use absentee ballots this year is because we are in the middle of a pandemic that is still going on, a pandemic that has taken the lives of nearly 300,000 people across our country. And while we did hear changes or suggestions on changes for the absentee ballot process, I am curious as to why we have not addressed any changes that we could potentially make to the Dominion voting machines, which Republican members insisted on passing as well. We know when the Dominion machine legislation was brought up for consideration, it was the Democratic members who voted against that legislation. A potential way to address some of the concerns of vulnerability with the elections machines would be to move to a hand-marked paper ballot system, a proposal I think would be supported by both Republicans and Democrats. And I'd finally just like to close by thanking election workers who have worked through a pandemic, countless hours, 3 different recounts, who have faced threats and who have worked, who are continuing to work because we are still in elections right now. And I'd like to thank them for the hard work that they've done because I know that they are under a tremendous amount of stress. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Wynn. Chair Lady Taylor.
Hi, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I agree with much of what has been said today. It was very informative. Some of this I had seen and heard before. I don't know how anyone could have watched this and not seeing the problems that we have had in this election cycle. There are many things that we need to do. I have a lot of questions, particularly for me, is the mobile voting, this outreach. I would like to know why this wasn't offered in other counties. Perhaps it was. Who paid for it? Were there bipartisan people on this van that went? Did they vote by machine? How is the eligibility check? There are so many questions in that. But for me, I live in rural communities where it is very difficult. And during a pandemic, for people to come in, we had a large increased number in our ballots. But I will tell you, if my small rural counties can do it correctly without these problems, I don't understand why we can't run a ballot in a larger community that has so many more assets and resources than we have in rural Georgia. to walk away from this now, I don't think any of us can. At this point in time, I think we need to learn more. And I think there's a lot more thought that needs to be into this. Frankly, I would like to see better security. I think that we need to have our GBI when they are counting ballots. I think we need to have a better security on those facilities. The watchers need to be able to watch and monitor. Too many things were hidden. I don't think this is what the people of Georgia expect in their voting. And I think it's going to be up to us to see that it can be fixed. We may not be able to fix it, of course, for this coming election that's coming up. But before we have another general election, it's going to be up to this committee. I do honor everyone that has voted, every person that has worked on this whole process. We've had dedicated people, staff, agencies, and local poll workers. Everyone has put their heart in it. We value our vote more than anything else in this country, and we've got to see that it's protected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Shannon. Representative Shannon. Okay, we'll come back to Representative Shannon. She may have stepped away from her computer.
No, I waived, Mr. Chair, because Representative Trammell Wynn covered everything. But thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williamson. You're muted.
I just had to unmute my microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple of comments. I do, first of all, Leader Trammell, enjoyed serving with him. I do have to strongly disagree with his comment about rule changes. I've heard nothing about rule changes during this, but we certainly, and by having an audit of the signature match is only about move forward. Do we have secure absentee balloting process or not? We just need to assure the public that their vote matters and legal votes only matter. That being said, I think it's very important that we revisit the evidence presented by Mayor Giuliani today, the uncontrovertible evidence of the problems with the adjudications of ballots that was presented that occurred in Coffee County. Unless you doubt the veracity of that statement, I would just refer the members of the committee to the affidavit that was sent by an administrative assistant of this committee at 1:24 p.m. today. And the affidavit not only verifies that they knew about this problem, but they've known about it for a while. So that I think all of us in a bipartisan manner want to make sure that there's no back doors, there's no ability for people to controvert the will of the elector or the voter by having somebody have the very clear, easy opportunity to change someone's vote. I think that goes without saying. So I would like to stress that on that note, that at some point when this committee issues a final committee report, I personally would like to have a mandated hand count in the upcoming election of paper only. We can use the ballot marking devices because the voter is able to verify on that piece of paper their intent, but drop that in the box. Do not use the scanners in this case, and do the same hand count of the absentee ballots, all of which should be confirmed by bipartisan watchers of every single ballot being counted. But that's my firm hope the committee would move forward and assure the people of Georgia that we have fair elections with only legal votes being counted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Representative Turner. Did I miss anybody? I think you'll be last to Representative Turner.
Oh boy. This may be my last words as a committee member and during a committee hearing. And I just want to start by saying thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting up with me for all these years. And your friendship means more to me than our professional one and our professional relationship. And thank you for that. I've made some great friends in my time in office as I head out as a self-term limited legislator. I'm in a unique position in that I'm the only Republican in the entire General Assembly and the House or the Senate that voted against HB 316, the bill that brought the ultimately the Dominion voting machines to Georgia. Now, I'm also the guy who started this debate when I started working on bringing paper ballots back to Georgia 6 years ago, and dropped the first bill 5 years ago to that effort, and was happy to see that we were moving to paper ballots. I'll remind the committee how hard I fought for the risk limiting audit, and that there were many interests aligned to fight the existence of the risk limiting audit in Georgia. And now it's become so important that we do that. And the whole vision behind all of that was to create a voting system that was 100% verifiable from beginning to end. And it's important that we verify every aspect of it so that we can identify areas for improvement. Those may be regulation or rules changes, but they could also be legislative changes. But we have to check. We have to check everything. And to this point, we haven't. And that's what's disappointing to me. And I'm most disappointed, frankly. And I have friends, dear friends, some I call brother, who work in the Secretary of State's office. And for them to go and have a press conference today and spend 40 minutes in front of television cameras and not come answer our questions today is completely unacceptable to me, not as a state rep or a member of this committee, but as a Georgian. I am beside myself that they would not bother to come talk to us. I think it shows a heightened amount of disrespect to this committee and this body, and it's not acceptable. To that end, over the Thanksgiving weekend, I authored a letter and had 20 plus, some members of this committee even signed a letter to the Secretary of State asking for a signature audit because it has to be checked. Now, state law requires us to keep that for 2 years, and it's implied that so that people can go back and look at those things. But the problem is that after certification, you're going to need a court order. So I won't be here to introduce that bill, but if I was coming back, I'd be dropping a bill on January 11th stating that we're opening that process up so that we can look at it. We didn't go through the RLA process and recount the ballots because of specific instances of fraud. It was to validate the system. We need to do that with the signature audits as well. And so I sit here in amazement as I watch the tables flip from my unique perspective as the only Republican who voted against the bill. Watching my friends who are Republicans saying, well, there's problems in the system now. These were things that I tried to bring up at the time. And watching my friends on the left who were saying, there are going to be problems in the system now saying, oh, everything's okay. The truth is probably in the middle. And it has been really hard to hold that candle of truth in front of the tsunami of misinformation that has been brought from everywhere. And when we have hammer and scorecard accusations, as one person tried to testify today, all we're doing is feeding this conspiracy theory stuff, and it's making it really hard to focus on the areas that actually need to be improved. Of all the stuff that we heard today, there were two things that stood out for me personally. And that is, we had a data analyst come and bring findings that matched a different data analyst's findings. And these two gentlemen never knew the other was doing the work, but the numbers matched. And you need to dig in on that because that's 15,000 potential people who voted in this election that shouldn't have. And we should be honest enough with ourselves to look at this process. I've defended this process from the beginning, even though I voted against the bill, because I believe that it was intended to be 100% verifiable. And so when you have independent auditors who have taken it upon themselves to look at our data, voting rule cleanup must be a priority. That's not changing the rules, that's doing a job. Somebody needs to do that, and they need to start doing it right away. And secondly is the issue around the signature match audit. I think if it has to be addressed legislatively, it should. And I'm just going to, one more thing, Mr. Chairman, we talked about this last evening. It pains me to bring this up, but the changing nature of the information that we've been getting as legislators from the Secretary of State's office has been most disappointing. I'm going to hold up a hard copy of a memo that we all got as members of the legislature dated November 12th from the Secretary of State's office. It has his signature on it. On that day, he sent us a frequently asked questions memo. And in it, it said, did Fulton County count ballots without observation? He says this particular issue remains under investigation. The Secretary of State's office had a state election monitor and a state post certified investigator who remained with Fulton County workers, even though some party appointed poll watchers may have left. Since both the observer and the investigator remained with Fulton County workers, scanning was observed by the Secretary of State's office at all times. And it's in bold letters. I'm going to read that again. Since both observer and investigator remained with Fulton County workers, scanning was observed by the Secretary of State's office at all times, in bold letters. That same exact language appears on a second memo from the Secretary of State's office on November 19th, which will be in your email if you kept it. Then the video comes, and there's no observer in the video. Now, I have some other issues with the video that shows at State Farm Arena where the observers were out of the room and the ballot counting resumed. I don't think that is as inflammatory as people have seen it to be, but this is my problem with it. There was nobody from the Secretary of State in that video when they restarted counting. And we were told twice, and I repeated this in public multiple times because I believe the Secretary of State's office when they told us that there was an investigator and an observer from the office at all times, because I had gotten it twice from their office. The video comes out, he's not there. They send another email to the legislature on December 4th, debunking the claims in the video from the Senate testimony. At the very last paragraph, this is what it reads. There was about an hour that workers scanned ballots before a state monitor arrived, but video shows those moments. They changed the story without even acknowledging that they changed the story. And that damages credibility. We have to be better than that. We have to be better than that. When I saw that, I was like, that doesn't add up. And it doesn't make sense. So I started doing some even more research, and I found this factcheck.org statement that the headline is video doesn't show suitcases of illegal ballots in Georgia, which, by the way, the word suitcases is an inflammatory term. It's very obvious for a casual observer that those are ballot boxes that look just like every other ballot box in Georgia. But that being said, what was most disappointing to me was this part of the statement. In a statement to PolitiFact or to factcheck.org, the Secretary of State's office, quote, we have launched an investigation into why monitors from political parties left before scanning ended. The Secretary of State's office said in the statement, while it was their right to leave early, we want to make sure they were not misled into thinking scanning had stopped for the night when it had not. Nothing we have learned from the independent monitor or our investigation have suggested any improper ballots were scanned. The monitor, who agreed to be interviewed on the condition of not being named due to death threats faced by election workers, told us he was in the room from about 8:15 p.m. and when he left and returned at 11:52. It doesn't take a whole lot of math to realize that's a lot longer than 1 hour. And then, this is the best part, the Deputy Secretary of State told factcheck.org that the monitor was not required to be there at all times, but she instructed him to return after hearing the news outlets that the county was going to cease counting for the night. This means that the Deputy Secretary of State knew the entire time that there was not an observer in the room when ballot scanning was happening, and they sent 2 memos to us saying that there was. The story doesn't add up. Somebody isn't telling the truth. And it's not acceptable, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry I won't be here to help you clean up this mess, but there it is.
Thank you, Representative Turner. I do want to thank everybody for their service to this committee. Thank you for your patience. And this was a very long day. And obviously, elections can be very intense regarding their discussion. But the people I've talked to, and friends of mine and others, they they know that the person they want to win is not always going to win. They just want to know the person that does win the election is the one who got the most legally and legitimately cast votes. So let's continue to work towards that end. Thank you again, all of you. Again, this is our first meeting of this particular investigation, not our last. Have a good evening. God bless. We stand.
Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? We've seen lots of this stuff. More and more proof, more and more politicians acting like they don't care, like they're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to let it slide. And then that one guy, that guy was so butthurt. My goodness. Just, wow. He was so butthurt. He was all grinning into the camera and stuff. He needed a hug. He needed his mama to hug him. He should call for his mama. She's probably in the other room while he was on his Zoom call. Anyways, thank you guys so much for being here. It's so, it feels defeating to hear that kind of stuff, to see so much evidence, to see so much proof. I mean, all they gotta do is cause doubt for an audit, and nope, they act like they don't want to audit. And like someone mentioned earlier in the chat, you would think that if they really believe that the vote went the way it did, the election went the way it did, that they would audit. They'd be like, oh yeah, go check it out. We ain't got nothing to hide. Oh no, they don't want that. They don't want that. And there's evidence, and there's video, and there's testimonies with affidavits. There's like, I don't even know why they keep doing this. They need to just audit. They need to just look into it. Like, there's so much evidence. Like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I don't know who could think that this was a fair election. Just super crazy. Yeah, I'm not sure what we're going to do from the titles and stuff from here on out. Normally we have a lot more viewers when we're running hearings, but I couldn't mention that kind of stuff because YouTube is trying to delete channels for showing this kind of stuff, which is crazy. Like, it's crazy. I mean, we were showing a Black Lives Matter protest like 2 days ago. There's people just pouring in here. There's like so much engagement, it was no big deal. Like, if you notice right now, if you scroll down right below the video, right below where I am, you'll notice there's not a big blue box saying that Biden won or whatever. If you notice that, that's because of the way that I titled the video. They don't realize what this is. So it's all a bunch of goofy computer stuff. The problem is that people are scrolling past this video and they're not watching it because they think it's not what they're looking for. So we're going to have to come up with some code words or something, I'm thinking. Yeah, because it's ridiculous. I'm sure the stuff going on in Portland is going to be happening later, and I'm sure when I go live, there'll be full support. There's not going to be censoring. There's not going to be no shadow banning. They're not going to be throttling my reach or my likes or my notifications. And it's crazy. It's crazy. There's so much corruption all around us. It's ridiculous. But regardless of all that, thank you guys so much for being here. Big shout out to everyone that's been making donations, everyone that joined the membership program, anyone that's purchased any merch. You guys are so awesome. You guys are what's keeping us running. You're why I can do this every day. Obviously, I haven't gone to work this whole week because I was sick earlier. And, if you have anything, you sweat too hard, right? You wiped your ass too hard. You can't do anything now. You got symptoms. So I didn't get to go to work at all this week. But this is the work I really want to do anyways. And because of all the donations and support and everything, I think I could probably do it. I think I could probably tell them to kick rocks. But I'm not really ready to walk off that edge yet. We got to see how things are going to go. Thank you guys so much. You guys are awesome. Like I said, there probably will be that stuff going on in Portland because Portland has that autonomous zone or whatever. Last time I looked at it, it looked like a homeless shelter, but that's neither here nor there. So we will probably be going live with that a little bit later. Go get some food, go drink some water, go watch a cartoon or listen to music or go play with your kids or play with your dog. Take your mind off the nonsense because it's all around us. And then make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you'll help the reach. Join the Discord. That way you will be notified when we go live later. If we go live later, I fully intend to, but if they're going to be standing around staring at each other, acting like they're in junior high again, I don't know that I want to show it. I got a lot of hate for that. There was a lot of people just pouring into my comments after the video wasn't live anymore, saying, oh, you just showed us 8 hours of people staring at each other. I can't make these people do anything. It's still happening. It's still something that's going on that the news isn't reporting. So, you know, I don't know. I don't need people reporting my account and stuff. YouTube already don't like me. So we'll see how it goes. Regardless, thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the